host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Doobie-doobie-doo.
All right. Happy 2025, ladies and gentlemen. It's the new year. We got a lot to discuss. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. We are going to get started off with our panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, let me show you what we are talking about tonight. We'll just go ahead and bring up the thumbnail on the screen. That's right. I know it's crazy. We're already back here. Can you believe it? We're already back. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing Chris Hedges exposes Jimmy Carter. Chris Hedges has some things to say about who Jimmy Carter really was. We're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Dr. Umar Johnson says no. What is he saying no about? We'll have to find out, ladies and gentlemen. We're also, of course, going to have the H-1B visa panel. There's been a lot of discussion about that. We're going to get started with that first. And last but not least, of course, we are going to discuss the New Orleans New Year's Eve attack. So I'm pretty sure you guys have a lot of feelings about that situation there. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with our panel. So as you guys know, I already discussed this story about the H-1B visa with Elon and Vivek, and I told you how I felt about this. But I wanted you to hear from other people as well. We're going to talk a little bit about what this means for American workers and also how this fits into worker exploitation. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring the panel in. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, fam. What is going on? And I think Professor Zinkus may join us. Let me put myself in the middle here. Professor Zinkus may join us if you can, but we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to start with the epic tweet, the tweet that kind of set things into motion. So we'll go ahead and bring that up on the screen. If you have not seen this yet, you are seeing it now. This statement came from Vivek Ramaswamy. He said the reason top tech companies often hire foreign-born and first-generation engineers over Native Americans isn't because of an innate American IQ deficit, a lazy and wrong explanation. A key part of it comes down to the C word, culture. Tough questions demand tough answers if we're really serious about fixing the problem. He goes on to say, our American culture has venerated mediocrity over excellence far way too long. That doesn't start in college, it starts young. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers. And I want to go ahead and I'll stop there. I know all of you on here have probably already seen this whole thing anyway, but this part right here that really resonated with me, and I'm going to pass it to the panel. A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ. So one thing that I do want to bring up is the class issue with this statement from Vivek Ramaswamy. Number one, I think he's under this impression that every parent is able to take their kids to a math Olympiad on the weekend, or I was on the debate team, or like to debate tournaments, or to even some of the football games. Like the reality is, if a parent is working a job where they work on the weekends, which some of my friends' parents did, they're not available to take their kids to participate in some of those activities that he's talking about. So I noticed the class issue with this, but I want to get everyone's perspective about this push from Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk about prioritizing H-1B visas. Let's go ahead and start with Yvette.
Well, it's actually kind of amazing, right? Like when you talk about American descendants of slavery, we talk about ADOS, we talk about having no wealth and tracking that all the way back to slavery. And here he is telling us that our problem is our culture. But the other thing that was interesting is that he wasn't just talking to us. We've had a whole situation where white conservatives have told us that our problem is the culture. Your problem is the culture. And it was so interesting, even though he's wrong, when he turned that back around and said, it's just the culture, which means he doesn't really understand America, because you just talked about class. What we understand is that he doesn't understand class in America. So when you're trying to preach to us about America and you don't understand American inequality and what drives that inequality, it makes me understand that, like, you shouldn't be talking to us about that. You may not know America enough about that. You may not know enough about American class or American culture to have this conversation. And nobody elected you to talk to us about that. Nobody elected Vivek.
Well said, Yvette. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in Ron.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think his tweet is just basically just a bunch of fluff and some ridiculous false dichotomy, which I think has been a lot of the conversation around this as a whole. I mean, you had, on one side you had MAGA, and they had the anti-immigration stance and the nationalistic stance. So then you had the contemporary American liberals who often can't see the forest beyond the tree from their ivory tower, going, well, I have an unlikely bedfellow here in Elon Musk. Ha ha ha. Well, what is Elon Musk and all of them doing? Well, apparently they're using these visas to exploit workers and pay them less, according to some of the reports that have come out recently. So we just kind of have this wave of false dichotomy, and now they have the question of, well, should we have more of these visas? Should we have less of these visas? That's the wrong question. That's the total wrong question. The question should be, how are these CEOs able to exploit these visas? What are these loopholes that they're using? Donald Trump himself said in 2016 that he was using these loopholes, and he was exploiting these visas. He said so himself. He was bragging about it. So, well, how are they doing that? The question should be, how do we close these loopholes? How do we fix this problem? But instead, they'd rather distract people like, well, should we have more of them or less of them? Or are you on this side or that side? It's absolute nonsense. I mean, and by the way, the stuff that they're allegedly doing is stuff that you shouldn't even be able to do with that visa. That thumbs its nose in the point of what a visa is supposed to be anyway. A visa is supposed to exist so that if someone wants to come live and work in a place or whatever, they get a shot to do so, but not at the detriment to citizens in a place. So that's the whole reason for it. And I've actually had some experience with this as someone who performs internationally. So the question we should be focusing on is, how are CEOs able to exploit this thing? And that's the question they're not going to want to ask.
That's a good point there. Let's bring in Zainab.
It reminded me of this whole rant that he went on, reminded me of J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy. Where he claimed that his grandparents were from one county over from where I live, and that our entire reason for poverty in this region has nothing to do with the coal barons, has nothing to do with oppression for the last 100 years. It has everything to do with our culture here and how we live our lives and how we don't, we're stupid, basically, just stupid redneck hillbillies. That same old, cliche, toothless stereotype. That's what it reminded me of. I do agree with him that sometimes there is not enough opportunity in academics in school systems that place way too much emphasis on sports. We even see that in K through 12 as well as in college. But it goes down to other aspects such as investing in schools, which is something Vivek doesn't support. Tuition-free college, which Vivek doesn't support. If we want our kids to be able to go to medical school, for instance, not every person has an opportunity to send their kids to medical school. This idea of meritocracy and everyone is born on the same playing field and we all have the same opportunities is nonsense. It's going to be people, just like Yvette was talking about. Yvette was saying, for Friedman coming up, you got to look back at the historical impacts of everything through generations. Generational poverty has real impacts. Generational wealth seeds real opportunity. There is a real deficit here. There is a massive wealth inequality here. People do not have the same opportunity. And somebody like Vivek does not support tuition-free college to be able to even compete. I know H-1B visas, for instance, are being used a lot in the medical field to bring in medical professionals because there is a shortage of medical professionals in the United States. One of the reasons why, it's too hard to go to school. No one wants to be saddled with a $350,000 debt to go become a doctor. That's why part of why we have a shortage. So I think this idea of meritocracy is ridiculous. I think that it comes from he talks about in the beginning a shallow analysis. I feel like his is an extremely shallow analysis of this situation and comes from a stance of someone who is, from wealth.
Yeah, he does. Denise, you mentioned something on Twitter. You said, I told you that what they do to freedmen will eventually fall back on you. I want to get your take on this as well.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the tweet that I put out in 2023, mid 2023, early 2023, that said, for those white Americans who are bastardizing the concept of equity in the United States of America, you need to know that when you go against the equity that freedmen are advocating for ourselves and other Americans, you are also going against your own equity. You can't throw the concept of equity, which I define as a practitioner as fair return on investment in a thing. You can't throw that away and then at the same time say Americans first, right? So what Vivek reveals to me, and to Zainab's point, he's always come forth with a historical shallow analysis. He's the one president when he gets elected that's going to do affirmative action, and he can't understand why no one has done it before. That's because those people understand why our country had to go through that harm, that the repair that harm. What Vivek is revealing a unique patriotism in the United States, where those folk who are not steeped in the civil rights movement, who are not vested in those harms, feel that they can come to the United States as a blank slate and just take their turn. Vivek is also of the highest caste in India and in his religion. And all of those things are coming together where he is showing the white Americans who were all for when he was telling black people he was going into affirmative action, right? And he was co-opting Martin Luther King Jr. They were all for it then, but everything that we have been telling them as black Americans about the harm of hurting us, what did Malcolm X say? Chickens coming home to roost. And you know what? Unfortunately, our brethren have to go through the hurt in order to learn the hard way. They don't believe fat meat's greasy, but they're not learning now.
This is such a very good point. I do want everyone to go ahead. I was going to wait for Professor Zinkas, but I'm not sure if he's going to be able to make it. But I want everyone to just take a chance to introduce yourself. Let's just go back up to the top. Yvette.
I'm Yvette Carnell. I am president of the ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery Advocacy Foundation, which was founded in 2020. Our movement started around 2016.
And Ron?
My name is Rob Placone. I'm a comedian and content creator, and I got a movie coming out this month. I'm really excited about it.
And Zineb?
Hey guys, I used to be a political advisor till I stopped doing that crap. I am also a journalist and I guess what you can call an activist, but a content creator. And I like to talk about crazy things and how both parties suck. And that's basically what I do.
All right, Denise.
Here on the both party things. It's bipartisan fuckery, if I can use that word on your channel. My name is Pamela Denise Long. I go by Denise. I write about things, Newsweek, other places, host Twitter spaces about the things I advocate for, which is leadership that actually works in the United States of America, that doesn't leave any of us Americans behind, and also advocating for the equity that is due to the Black American descendants of U.S. slaves, freedmen, all the things that we are called, but we are a founding population of the United States, and that shall not be forgotten by those who have been here for a while, as well as those who are new to the game.
All right, and just joining us, Professor Zinkas, if you can introduce yourself.
I'm not muted. Hey everybody. I'm Anthony Zinkas. I am a social work professor at Columbia University and Adelphi University in New York. I'm an activist and happy to be on a panel with such amazing people. Hey, Zaina, I haven't been on a panel with you before, so anyway, and those I don't know, but happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, awesome. So Denise actually mentioned something that I did want to bring up about the caste system. Now, this is something that Shama Sawant kind of was like raging about for years, that the caste system is a problem. She actually won the fight against the caste system in Seattle. But I want to bring this up here because Yvette, You tweeted this, and people need to understand, like, this is all relevant. Yvette said the caste system dictates a person's profession, who they can marry, and other aspects of their social life. It also determines access to wealth, power, and privilege. Why not fight for meritocracy in India? And so this is the caste system that Yvette is speaking of. Brahmins are at the top. I believe Vivek is from the Brahmin caste. And then we can go on down from here, but he's at the top. So I bring that up again because there was a narrative, and I'll pass it back to you, Yvette, that Vivek was running when he was running for president. He was going on to all these different media shows, and he was telling people that his parents came to this country with nothing. And that was a blatant lie. I tried to tell people back then that he was lying about what he was able to start off with versus the way a lot of us had really nothing to start off with. His parents came to this country with college degrees. So they were already a step ahead of some of us who are here. Why would he omit that information? Yvette, I want to pass it to you and hear a little bit more about how his caste system can help him in this country.
Well, I just want to throw a fly in the buttermilk too, because we made the same argument about Kamala Harris's mother. In the sense that she's not ADOS in terms of she doesn't come from chattel slavery, not to diminish her, but to say we're not the same. There is no flat blackness. We said that in 2019. So when Vivek is trying to run this con too, and this is the con of, oh, this is the best and brightest. We came here with nothing, and you just get to say it. You just get to lie with impunity. But there's another problem here though, and this is especially on the right. The problem that the right has too is that they don't even have any class analysis. Vivek, he didn't even need to say that. They say it all the time to make it look like, you know, those of you all who come from slavery, it is because you didn't do what you need to do. My parents, my people came here for $2, and they say it, and it's just not true. If you are not ADOS and you don't have that contagion of race, then it's just not true for you anyway, because it's a racialized caste in this country, and you are not us and we are not you. But the lack of class analysis on the right even got them in the position of believing that Elon Musk, a transnational billionaire, was on their side. So part of the problem here is that they're not able to break down lineage, race, or caste to understand who a person is and what they're going to do once they get here. So now we have this man who is head of this fake agency, Doge or whatever, government, and he's running around telling us what to do, all because the white right decided to elevate somebody that never should have been elevated based on a stack of lies. That is a problem, and that's a problem on their side. And so the question now becomes whether or not Make America Great Again can take back their movement. They said they were going to stop the steal on January 6th, which was crazy, but now is the time to stop the steal, because you have a bunch of unelected people in your movement who are stealing what you said you were going to do on immigration. That's a huge problem for them right now.
That's a really good point, Yvette. Yvette. I said Yvette. That's a really good point, because I have seen quite a number of MAGA supporters that have been raging towards Vivek and Elon Musk. And also, I mean, to keep it real, Donald Trump is agreeing to this too. He's saying, like, yeah, we need to get more H-1B visas. Ron, I want to go to you next about this whole issue about the exploitation, because Vivek and Elon are telling people right now that, well, they're the smarter engineers, they're the brighter people, and that's why we have to recruit them instead of hiring Americans that are already here for these jobs. I think you and I both know that's not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a lot of circumstantial things out there that they are exploiting, you know, what these visas are actually meant for. They're finding these loopholes. And Donald Trump himself is now, you know, waffling on this issue. And I hope, you know, going on that, I hope that, you know, people in MAGA kind of start seeing this and they realize that, hey, your problem is not the immigrant. Your problem is, you know, these people who say that they have your back so that you give them your vote, and then they totally do not have your back. So yeah, I mean, I think they're clinging to whatever excuses they can cling to try to get what they want. And in reality, again, this is a systemic problem because they're exploiting these loopholes. So how do you end that exploitation? I mean, hey, clearly the president-elect would know how to do that because he claimed himself that he was taking advantage of this for his businesses. So, you know, that's what you would love to see.
And I'm going to go to you next, Professor Zinkus, since you work at university. One of the things that I noticed, this is a couple years ago, when I was still working in higher ed, I did notice that at one point there was that restriction on the H-1B. The rule was that these companies had to interview domestic students, college students first, and give them a chance before they would give a job or position to a student that would require some type of sponsorship, which would be that H-1B visa. I do remember that. And what I noticed is that a lot more of our graduates at that point in time that were domestic students were getting those positions. When that changed under Biden, it went back to the way it was before, which is that a lot of these companies that recruit at these universities here, like Boston University, Harvard, et cetera, they were more willing to hire the students that required the H-1B visa. And the reason being is because they could pay them less. Because again, what are the students going to do? Are they going to say, oh, you're offering me too low of a salary? Okay, well, the company would say, fine, then you can go work back at home. So they were exploiting those students. And then it's not that the domestic students were not smart enough or didn't have, as good grades to get those positions. It was that these companies wanted to pay people less. So whoever they could get for the cheaper labor, that's what they would do. I want to hear a little bit from you about that as well, Professor Zinkus.
Right. And I mean, the purpose of the H-1B visa is, ostensibly it's a good idea if you can't find anyone in this country to fill the job who has the skills, who can do it. You don't want to not be able to have the job. You want to be able to bring someone in. But that's not how it's used, right? So, you look at Tesla, they just laid off thousands of workers. And now they're saying, oh, we can't fill the jobs. Well, it's a scam. And with universities, of course, private universities are going to do this, especially because they're for-profit corporations. They're all about their endowments. Like I work at a university. I exist in my tiny little bubble of the School of Social Work, and we're all about teaching the students and doing all that work. The university itself, that company, that corporation, is all about money. And so, yeah, that it is ludicrous on its face to think that any job in a university couldn't be filled if it was employing students with one of the students who is domestic. And this isn't to pit Americans against foreigners. If there are people that were qualified for something that nobody else was, that would make perfect sense. But that's simply not the case in universities. So, of course, they use it for that reason. And one bigger piece here, I think, too, is, do you hear any of these Republicans or Democrats that agree with it talking about seriously investing in our educational system or investing in communities so that kids are growing up in neighborhoods and environments that support education, that don't have high levels of unemployment, police occupation, crime, things like that, right? No. So they're saying, oh, we don't have qualified Americans, but we're not going to do anything about that. And we need to bring people in and suppress wages. Everything they do, the capitalists, the hyper-capitalists especially, is about increasing their profit and their power. It's never on its face what it looks like. And I include universities with that as well.
That's right. Really good point there. Denise, I want to get your take on this as well about the wages and the exploitation. I did cover this a couple of months ago, that the unemployment rate in this country in 2024 surged among Black Americans. Only among Black Americans. And this is another thing. It's like there's all these people out there that are unemployed, that are gainfully, willingly looking for employment and can't find jobs. But here is Vivek and Elon saying, let's prioritize H-1B visas.
Yeah, I believe there was a study that was done in California after the pandemic and the recovery, where some 70+% of Black men who'd lost their jobs during COVID were still unemployed. We have a massive problem in this nation. The robust innovative investment in education of various sorts being one of them, including upskilling, reskilling, and the like, doing vocational assessments with people who have the competence and capacity for the jobs that they're bringing foreigners in to do, and giving them alternative certifications to credential them to be able to do those jobs, right? To verify that they're qualified. We also are ignoring this huge problem of ethnic nepotism in hiring, firing, and retention in the tech industry. Casteism, in addition to the ways in which so-called lower castes of Indians are precluded from being hired and or they are fired, but certainly the ways in which Americans in general, there was just a lawsuit about Americans in general who were fired and or not hired. So there are multiple things that are going on here that Vivek, there was an article that came out about him and his caste 3 years ago when he first came on the scene, and he was condemning casteism and the like, but that's a nice thing to say, but the reality is that it is a practice that's in the United States. And as Yvette is always saying, and as everybody who is honest always knows, when it gets to the caste order in the United States of America, Black Americans are at the bottom of it, even below Black immigrants at times, because they are not perceived as we lazy Negroes of America. So there's a lot happening here that needs to be uncovered.
Very good point. Just because says no 5 Black engineers and programmers looking for work. Yeah, and I've known people in this boat too. A friend of mine just got a job after looking for 9 months with experience. So when people say that the people aren't there or the skills aren't there, that's not true. The skills are there. They just don't want to hire them. They don't want to pay people what they're worth. And Zeneb, I want to bring you in for this too, because I know you were on like a job search at one point. I know you went through a lot. So I want to hear from you about this.
Still been looking. I applied for 1,175 jobs over the last 2 years. Callbacks were very limited. A lot of employers, when I finally did get to the point where I could be interviewed for the jobs, it could be a 3-4 month process. You know, you go through 6, 7, 8 interviews. I'm sure you guys have experienced that. When I was going for regular jobs, you know, a job at Kroger, let's say, even though I have college degrees, well, because I have college degrees, that means that I might leave the job. So they don't want to hire me for that. Right. When I go for the more upskilled positions that have to do with the college degrees, then, you know, one of the things I found is I am dealing with the American caste system. And the American caste system is if you're from an Ivy League school, you get put front in line. If you don't have a Middle Eastern name or a Black name or something that is perceived to be that, or a person of color, you get, especially, and I know that impacts the Black community more than it does folks like myself, but it's real for different sectors of our culture. If my being from Kentucky impacts that, you know, people are like, oh, you're from Southeastern Kentucky, you're Appalachian, and they hear my accent come out, there's an immediate assumption that I'm uneducated. And that really does go into play with how people react with me. And you see that over time. And also, like I was saying before, you can go to school, you can do the things that they tell you to do. I went to school for journalism, public relations, but I also have coding experience. I had a minor in geology. I was 1 class away from having a major in geology. So it's not, and I was in the restaurant industry for 18 years. So there's people like this that have all kinds of different backgrounds, experience, abilities. But there's a big aspect to this, and I think that Ron may have mentioned this before, and Yvette mentioned as well as Denise, and that is H-1B visas are used in part to create this system where when people are brought in, they stay at one company, they can't leave that company, or they're deported, and they're paid less. So, you know, it's a matter of, that's one of those barriers. I have nothing against immigration, but when you hear somebody like a Donald Trump or somebody like a Vivek Ramaswamy or one of these people say, we're bringing in the good ones, they're talking about H-1B visas. They're talking about immigration where if somebody has $250,000, $1 million, you know, they get sped through the process way earlier, and then they can come here and also start small businesses. which is something that the people in my area, we're taught, keep your head down, work for the company, don't piss off the boss, nose to the grindstone, don't start businesses. We're not taught about entrepreneurship here in Eastern Kentucky. We're just not. We're taught work for the man. You know, we're not even taught how to grow our own businesses. And that's what I see among poor communities across the board. And then we go and we try to get the job with the man that's supposed to have the benefits and all of that. And then they don't want to hire us. It's a catch-22. And then you have systems like the H-1B visa system, which, like I said, I have no issue with immigrants. My father was an immigrant. I don't have an issue with that. What I have an issue with is exploitative systems that aren't in place to help people, but then also impact and negatively impact U.S. citizens who are also already being exploited and already struggling and already, you know, they can't buy homes, they can't get stable jobs, they don't have health care, they can't get education. That's the problem.
This is another good thing to bring up too, for people who do have the H-1B visas. That's a good point. So now people have to realize that, like, if they are upset with their boss, or if they are in a work environment that can be verbally abusive, which is not uncommon in the tech industry, by the way, and some others, it's not like they can just quit and go get another job. To Zainab's point, like, that visa has certain restrictions, and they do have to stay at that same company for a certain amount of time, or they have to go back home. Now, compare that to those of us who are American citizens. We don't have to, if we don't like it, we can go look for another job. So we don't have that type of restriction that they have. So to that point, they're trying to prioritize workers that they know are less likely to complain, are less likely to make any type of issue if there are issues, and they're less likely to leave within like the first 5 years. So, and they're paying them cheaply. Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are both entrepreneurs. This is to enrich them. They want to hire people that they can continue to pay cheaply. Don't forget that Elon Musk didn't even want to let Tesla employees unionize. Let's not forget that. And that brings me to this point here from Li Feng, because even he brought it up. He said, yes, American corporations exploit H-1B visas to lower wages. And he goes on to say here, just want to read this part. He said, outsource. And he mentions a couple of companies. These are just a few. Cognizant, a tech firm in New Jersey, routinely obtains 5,000 H-1B visas a year. He mentions Google, Amazon, Microsoft, all rely on a funnel of such workers. So even Li Feng is pointing this out. And he said the first major rift in the Trump coalition boiled over with the anger of H-1B visas. The program is widely exploited to lower American wages via foreign workers. And I want to pass it back to Yvette here. Yvette, now when we're talking about this and I'm thinking about the job market, this also means, of course, because we always continue to go through when we look at equality versus equity, a lot of times we're at the bottom. Black people are at the bottom. So when we're talking about these jobs, we're talking about applicants that are being looked over, then that would also mean that more than likely American freedmen are going to be looked over for these jobs.
Well, I mean, when you talk about ADOS, we have been multi-generationally looked over for these jobs, right? So it's almost as if they're moving things around. Because remember, the Immigration Act of 1965 is right there, right behind the Civil Rights Act. So it's almost like you gave us these rights and these new things in life and said you have opportunity, and then you brought in people who could be used to take that opportunity away. Because there is conflict when we talk about labor. Nobody really wants to have that kind of discussion, but people are competing for that, right? And so you give it to us, and then now you bring in extra competition. And that's what the right and a lot of conservatives are talking about right now. Because Vivek really did a slick little thing. Make America Great Again was about making Americans' lives better. That's what Trump was talking about. Make America, you are going to be great. You're going to have the greatest healthcare. You're going to be. That's what he said. But then Vivek comes out and said, no, it's about making American corporations great again, right? And who benefits from that? So you have to ask the question that people don't want to ask, because there is no sort of, even when we talk about black, there is no flat blackness. There are more Ethiopian doctors, right, in Chicago than Ethiopia. You have to ask yourself, who benefits from that? It is certainly not Ethiopia. So we're not even talking about the brain drain from other countries that they have to deal with too. It's not just about, we did not in terms of build up a labor movement in this country, even with ADOS, we did not do all of this stuff to make corporations great again. So you're not going to invest. And so it's all about your bottom line. And you're saying that that's going to flow down to me, Reagan's trickle down economics. No, we're not doing that anymore. And I think it is bringing together another conversation that I'm even hearing from conservatives about, like, what does it mean to be a multi-generational American? And for people to tell you, hey, I know you did this, and I know your mama, daddy, grandmama, granddaddy, they fought in all these wars and made these contributions, but hey, you watched Saved by the Bell, so now you're just not good enough. And I think everybody, left and right, has to fight back against that kind of, that kind of caricaturing of who Americans are and what built this country. And there is no America also without American chattel slavery. And so that's kind of what our pushback is. I remember when Nagel's article came out, the left case against open borders, and I saw that attack, right, again. And so I'm hoping that the left really understands that open borders in and of itself is anti-union and it's anti-labor. So I didn't see enough fighting from the left in there. I hope to see more of that too.
That's a good point that you brought up there. Of that, I think people are, because of this particular issue, I think people might be seeing things a little bit differently. Now it's a shame that it had to be Vacant and Elon to really wake people up about this. And I want to go to you next, Ron. This whole idea of, we've been talking about the gig economy as well for quite some time. This has been a surge as well. It's like these employers don't want to hire permanent employees. They want people to have like these contract positions or temp to hire, temp to perm, which sometimes doesn't even turn out to be a permanent position. They lie to people about that. Or it's just a gig job. And I know like you're in arts and entertainment and stuff like that, so you might be familiar with that as well. I see that as an issue to go along with this as well. The point that I'm trying to wake people up to tonight is that we are moving closer and closer to an all-out gig economy, to where like these companies are just going to say, we're not going to offer you any benefits of any kind. You are lucky that we're offering you something, so just take what we give you. And I want to bring you in with that, Ron.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a lot of experience with what you're talking about. Interestingly enough, even more so than in show business, in academia, a place where you and I both used to dwell, Sabby, and you currently do, Dr. Zinkus. There was a point in time where I remember they were using temp agencies for adjunct teaching positions. At one point, when I was adjuncting some on the side, I was offered full-time adjuncting work. It wasn't a straight up, professorship or anything like that. It was like an adjunct full course load. And I turned it down because I actually made more money just going on the road doing stand-up comedy than I would have made as a full-time adjunct. That's how little they paid for these courses. And there's always these interesting loopholes where you can just exploit people more and more. And then there's always these things that come up where they trick Americans into voting against their better interest. Here in California, we had an issue with Prop 22. It was a thing that would have protected Uber drivers and other workers like that more. But there was a huge propaganda campaign that were basically tricking people into voting against their own interests. And it worked here, didn't work in the UK, but it worked in California. So it just keeps getting worse and worse. And to bring it back to this issue, another really interesting kind of tidbit here is, look, I mean, I live in Los Angeles. When it comes to people wanting to get a visa just so they can try to work here or try to get a gig here, if it's in, entertainment, TV, film, comedy, whatever, it is wild the hoops they make people go through. And it is crazy expensive. When I meet people, especially like when I meet comics from the UK, because they have like a stronger creative class over there compared to here. When I meet people that, because it costs like 10 grand or something like that to get a visa, and it's only good for 3 years, and they're talking to me about it, and I'm just going, do you hate your weather that freaking much that you decided to just give up more opportunities to come here? And guess what? You don't have healthcare either. So my point is that, we make it very, very hard for just any given person to try to come here. Like we're not a welcoming country in any way. But if it's a CEO wanting to exploit a worker, Then all of a sudden, there's all these loopholes. Then all of a sudden, it's very, very easy. Then all of a sudden, right to work laws get passed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, it really is just another symptom of the plutocracy.
Really good point there, Ron. Professor Zinkas, I want to pass it to you again about what's happening with the colleges. Another thing that I noticed too is that some of these universities, you're probably familiar with this with Columbia as well. Some of these universities have relied so heavily on international students for admission. And when the pandemic happened and, Donald Trump had different policies under his presidency at that point in time, some of these programs, in particular at schools like BU, MIT, they started to panic because some of these programs have relied on just recruiting international students, just going off of the high test scores and not really seeking out for domestic applicants, even though domestic students were applying to those programs. They were always pushed further down. And I say this as someone who worked in admissions. And so they relied on that. And then when those things happen, then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because the majority of the students in this program are international students. And I would have thought that would have taught universities to invest in domestic students here at home. But no, here we go again, like with the H-1B visas. And so it's like, it bothers me because I know the talent is here and I've seen the talent here. And for the tech industry, when people continue to say that we're just not educating people here for STEM has actually increased in the US over the past 10 years. There's a number of programs like Black Girls Code, et cetera, where they have gone out into the K through 12 schools to start kids learning STEM early. So it's not where it's not perfect. It's not on the level as like a country as China, but it has increased. And so it bothers me when people like Vivek and Elon say that the talent isn't here.
Yeah, well, as far as international students go, I just want to start that conversation off by saying one of the things I love, about Columbia, for instance, is it has a global focus to its social work department. We're very much founded on looking at issues through the lens of privilege, racism, and oppression, and having a global focus, and that's good. That said, a corporate private university, and this is happening more and more across the board, that they are reaching out to get students who internationally who can pay full tuition and fill seats. I'm not saying those students aren't qualified. That's not the point. Many people are. There's an acceptance rate, which is always, what some of these, especially with Ivy League schools, 6, 7, 8% of those applicants end up getting in, right? Something like that. They are reaching out to do that because they know it's a guaranteed stream of income. And it's troubling if that becomes a focus. And again, like you can look at any particular school, the School of Medicine, I work in a School of Social Work, 2 of them. There's schools of engineering. They're all about the teaching. They get down into it. As I said before, the university looks at things globally through a bottom line. And they're like, we need this. I don't know that they have quotas. I've never heard about them. But I do know that international students whose families or countries pay for them to come here in full are a guaranteed source of revenue, right? And I want to throw something in, if I could I had highlighted for myself, if I was able to make it on tonight, and I'm glad I could just for a little bit, a tweet by Elon. And I mean, look, any of his posts are, pretty horrible lately, especially. But he says, America rose to greatness over the past 150 years. And then he puts a comma in there. By the way, there was no reason for that comma. America rose to greatness over the past 150 years because it was a meritocracy more than anywhere else on earth. And we keep hearing that word. And I responded, I quote tweeted, and I said, what nice way to discount centuries of privilege and racism and supremacy. But there's no meritocracy here. There's never been a meritocracy here. And they use that word And they like to do it because people would like to live in the world where that was a thing, where the best person was hired or put into school, where we didn't need to have it would be great to live in a world where we didn't need things like affirmative action, right? If there was mutuality and respect and justice and everybody was treated with equity, we wouldn't need any of those things. But that's not the world we live in. We don't live in a meritocracy. That totally, and I'm not shocked that a guy who was raised in apartheid South Africa and whose family made their fortune there is going to discount the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow in the United States, which is the single biggest cause of economic problems that Black Americans who were descendants of slavery face. And I know that Yvette it has expertise in that. So that argument, it's always like, oh, we're looking for the best. It's a lie. They repeat a word often enough. So you hear people say, yeah, meritocracy, I want that. Because that sounds fair and good. And it does. What I do like, though, is that people I tend to not love much at all, like Steve Bannon, and I think is kind of a nut, right? There is some consistency morally for them on these issues. And if it is an opportunity for people on the left, again, we're worker-centered, and people on the ostensibly right who are also trying to stay true to that worker, for us to come together on a
Oh, I think you froze there a little bit, Professor Zinkus. I can come back to you. Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, and but that we're coming together. We're calling bullshit on both parties, and I said in a post a little bit after that something. This Republicans are just, or MAGA's just waking up to the fact. And I listed a few things, and one of them was that billionaires don't care about us, and Vivek Ramaswamy is annoying. And so I'm treading into Ron Placone territory there by trying my bit of comedy here and there. But I think this is an important thing. They keep saying they repeat the word meritocracy enough so that people say, well, that's fair. Of course I want that. And it disguises, years, centuries of oppression are just swept away by dismissing them.
100%. And Elon got by the way, this whole, I did it all on my own. I built these companies on my own. No, he got his wealth from his father. Like, I'm sorry. It's like people who have this amount of they come from money or they come from a certain status, for them to come into the US and to sell that narrative of, well, look, I built this all on my own. That's BS. And second of all, if you're a billionaire like Elon Musk, you didn't build anything on your own. It was the people who worked for you, the labor that you exploited that actually made you a billionaire. And that's how you got to where you are. I want to bring in Zineb and then Denise about this as well. The public education system, this is something that was brought up, and I do want to get into this. We have a problem with K through 12 in this country. Zineb, you brought up we don't have free college. This is true. But the K through 12 system relies on funding from property taxes. So depending on what your zip code is, depends on the type of education that you get in this country. And I want to hear a little bit about that, because my whole thing is, why aren't people like Vivek and Elon trying to use, why isn't Elon Musk using his billions to try to fix the public education system in this country? That's my whole kind of thing. Because the reality is, if you live in a certain zip code, your schools have certain resources that others do not. Go ahead, Zineb.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And around here, we talk about being defined by your zip code a lot in Appalachia in the mountains, because, you don't really have, people always say, won't you just move? Yeah, that's easy and cheap and accessible for people. But one of the things that sticks out to me that I remember is that a lot of programs started here in around 2005, I guess it was, for coding. Now, we've seen this in a lot of Black neighborhoods, too. In Atlanta, I know that this was done. In Nashville, in Knoxville, there were a lot of different places. So what they did is they poured a lot of money, well, not a lot of money, a little bit of money into teaching people how to code in these areas so that we could potentially work remote jobs or we could get coding jobs. What we found is that people weren't getting hired from the places where the money was poured in. And it's not because they weren't skilled at it. It's because the remote jobs were still being outsourced either overseas, which is happening a whole lot now. And we're talking about H-1B visas, but we're not talking about how much remote jobs are now being outsourced overseas. I know two different people who work in tech. So what they do is they do like software programming, engineering, who both of the companies that they work for Fortune 500s and are outsourcing in mass quantities to remote work overseas now. So they're headquartered in the United States, but are outsourcing overseas. So you don't even need H-1B visas to outsource this work. They're just directly doing it through remote work now for coding and for engineering, for anything that's web-based, because you don't have to be here to do that work necessarily. You can do it remotely. So that is a problem that is not even being addressed whatsoever. And secondly, people aren't being hired for these coding jobs. There's plenty of news stories. If you go and look, in 2019, analysis was done of these regions where all this money was dumped into teaching us to code, and it did not translate to work for these people pre-pandemic or post-pandemic. So that's one thing. The second thing is, when Lincoln first drafted the concept of land grant colleges, the idea was for people to be able to go to school tuition free, and was a part of the restoration movement before he was assassinated. So, if he was wanting freedmen to go to college for free through land grant colleges with everyone else about a month and a half before he was assassinated, that's something that, isn't talked about a lot either. But that concept, up until about 25 years ago, state-based universities were subsidized at 85%. 85%. That meant that the boomer generation and some of Generation X got to go to school essentially for free. The bulk. That's why they could work summer jobs and then have their school and their education paid off, was because it was subsidized at 85%. It is now subsidized at 11%. So the students are carrying the burden. And that's why this big bubble expanded in the cost of college. The cost per student hasn't changed much, and in fact has gone down for state universities for the most part. But it's the amount of federal subsidies going into college while we send billions off to Afghanistan to fight wars, to fight this war to carry out a genocide in Gaza, to do all these things that we're doing overseas. We are not investing in our universities. That stopped. 11% from 85% subsidies. So the government covered 85% of college tuition for state-based colleges and even SBUs. Now it's 11%. Almost across the board. So those are two big things. So yes, in some of these places, there aren't as many skilled workers in the United States. We have the skills. We need the opportunity to get the education to be able to then go and get the job. But it benefits them for us to not do that, because they can hire overseas, or they can hire this labor and keep them as basically indentured under that company for 5 to 6 years, working at a lower rate, where this individual can't go other places and they don't get the same benefits that they might have to offer if there was actually competition here for that same work. We're looking at that in the medical industry, in the tech industry, and other industries as well.
Denise, I wanted to mention this to you as well. I know that Vivek and Elon keep mentioning the tech industry, but I saw an article recently that showed that Amazon warehouse in Arlington, Virginia, right outside of DC, they had already hired over 2,000 H-1B visas. Now that's a warehouse. That's not a tech job. That's not like so anybody can do the Amazon warehouse job. They train you how to do it. So the point I wanted to get across to people is, like, it's not just the tech industry. It's not just the healthcare industry. People have to understand, like, that all these different companies, regardless of what the industry is, they have been utilizing this process. Donald Trump said he utilized it himself. Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah. So the gift of, besides, having white people think about the realities of being multi-generational Americans who are vested in the equity of the nation, the gift of this conversation is I hope that people start to look into visas in general. There are lots of visa. You could get an H visa for a fashion model. Okay, like, are we short on beautiful Americans now? Is that what we're saying? So, so I hope people dig into visas in general. I've written about immigration for the last 3 years for Newsweek, and in one of the many articles that I've written, I talk about the reality that all a company has to do is to put a job ad somewhere and say, we didn't get enough qualified Americans to apply for this, and therefore we're going to go and use a visa immigrant a sort of route for it. There are a couple other things that I wanted to mention here, and I'm going to take us back a little bit about merit. So what Elon, Vivek, and many others are doing, besides the ahistorical point of this, is they are saying that America is and has been meritocratic. They are not saying that and they're saying America needs to continue that, right? And even be even more meritocratic because, and I've had Asian folk tell me this before, this is not xenophobic, this is them saying we tend to test better. And your merit for these positions to get into colleges is based upon your ability to test well and demonstrate your competence with the content, right? We should be talking about also the fraud that happens with testing in foreign countries as well as the ways in which proctors in America have been paid to change the results on standardized testing for students here. There's a lot of stuff, again, that needs to be uncovered with this, but absolutely, you're 100% right about the uncomfortable and inconvenient truths about how visas are used in the United States. And it's not need often. There are many things: nepotism, anti-American sentiment, and just plain old profiteering on the parts of companies.
Well said. This is my final round here for the panel. We're going to go back to Yvette. Yvette, one of the things, I mean, I know you talk about this often, but one of the things that I know that you had mentioned, and I've seen other people mention this as well, we've mentioned it on this show, again, going back to when you go against something that can benefit descendants of slavery, American descendants of slavery, it comes back around to you. And to your point, a lot of people are seeing this now. Like, we are seeing white people that supported like Trump be very vocal about the fact of this isn't fair. You're saying you're going to prioritize H-1B visas. What about the rest of us? Like, we need jobs. I told you guys before, the unemployment rate surged among Black Americans. We just saw an article recently that said that the homeless rate increased 18% in 2024. So that's us. Like, that's us out on the streets. Black Americans are 40% roughly about of the homeless population. So these types of things. Do you think that what is happening now is going to wake more people up, like more white Americans up to, whoa, they're doing this to us now?
Well, I hope white Americans on the right. I don't want to just say white Americans because we have a lot of them on the left too. But I hope white Americans on the right, and conservatives especially, realize that they took their eyes off the ball. Right? They got so invested in Elon Musk and his culture wars and him being anti-woke, and he was tweeting racist stuff and all kinds of stuff, and people got real happy because he was doing that. And they didn't realize that you can't trust a billionaire and a millionaire with your grassroots movement. You just can't do it. And they didn't have any analysis in that. And their blind spot was racism. If they had not gotten so caught up in that racism, they wouldn't have had that blind spot. So what I hope is that that blind spot begins to fade away somewhat. Because listen, I give the conservatives credit for one thing. They did go and find somebody to buck the system, like the Republican Party. The Republican Party in general, like in terms of the big wigs, they didn't really want Trump. They had a whole nother election and they said, we're going to have him again. We're going to do it one more time. They did buck the system. The problem is that they did not understand that the person who you buck the system to get cannot be a leader of your movement because they are part of the millionaire and billionaire class. And even the millionaire and billionaire of today do not support you as white Americans because they're not Carnegie building a school. They're not Rockefeller building a school. They don't care about you because they're plutocrats and they're post-nationalists. They don't even agree. They don't even believe in sovereignty or nation states anymore. And so you have to move conservative America past this idea that anybody who critiques rich people has some kind of axe to grind or has some kind of jealousy embedded in them somewhere. That's what they believe. And so I hope this kind of takes it and gets them to a moment where they can just breathe and say, because of the culture wars, we really got snookered. Because we wanted to go and make these anti-woke jokes and stuff like that, we really got taken advantage of. I hope that they can see that, but they can't see it as long as they're going around still believing this is a meritocracy when it really comes out of a slaveocracy. We're going to have a problem. But I hope this does move them in a certain direction, because conservatives, and we on both sides, we've just lost movements. The Tea Party started off as a movement. I think it was initially libertarians. It got co-opted by the establishment Republicans. We had Occupy Wall Street. Right now we have the ADOS movement. But I'm saying that there have been movements lost, and MAGA is a movement of its own. And I just hope conservatives begin to realize that your leaders can't be millionaires and billionaires. They're never going to do what's right for you or American workers.
That part right there. And Ron, I want to bring it to you. Obviously, I know you remember the Medicare for All marches that we had in this country, over 50 cities in the country, et cetera. This is another one that I bring up where I think I first heard about this from Thomas Howell. I forget. Tom Hartman. Yeah, old school dude. Tom Hartman was talking about this one time on his show years ago. Now, the reason why we don't have universal health care in this country is because they didn't want Black people to have health care. So this is another thing, again, that in the end, it affected lower class white people, too. That's another thing. And I do feel like as long as people are divided among like Republican and Democrat, as long as people are fighting red and blue team fighting against each other, I think you totally overlook the class perspective. What's your take?
Oh, I agree with you 110%. And they do it in more subtle ways, too. Also, a side note, I wanted to really quickly add, you can't trust a billionaire with your grassroots movement should be on a T-shirt. It might be too many words, but I do think that is a very worthy slogan. But I mean, I'll give you a more recent and more subtle example. I mean, I was having a conversation with somebody who was, more kind of centrist than myself. And the topic was free college. And they said, why I don't want free college in the United States because I don't want Donald Trump's kids to go to school for free. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. You really think, first of all, you really think that people that rich are going to be going to public universities? That's probably not going to happen. But second of all, what a bizarre take to have, and what a bizarre pretzel logic, just twisting of a situation here. And I think that sort of hyper tribalism is very present in the United States, and I think it can be traced back to larger themes. One of the big themes that I think we're really kind of hitting on here is that we don't view education as a public good. We just don't see it that way. We see it as a luxury. We're the only country in the world that has the amount of wealth that we do as a country that doesn't view arts and culture as part of life. We view it as a luxury. Nobody takes a step back to realize how freaking bizarre that actually is. Other countries that have similar wealth to us, they outspend us in art spending about 10 to 1. And even that 10 to 1 figure is misleading, because guess where that one that we spend goes to? You guessed it, the military. So even that one that we do spend is actually misleading. So that bleeds into education. Again, we don't view education as a public good. So the subsidies has changed drastically, as Zainab pointed out. And that's why we don't invest in our schools in K through 12. That's why we have Americans turning against each other via things like school choice, via things like charter schools, via all these things like, well, let me just look out for my neighborhood and screw everything else, because we've just lost this kind of big sense of community because we've just been stretched so thin by the oligarchy that runs this place.
Well said. And Professor Zinkas, I wanted to bring up this point as well. This whole issue, I know you've talked about this before on RBN, and I think you had a TED talk about this. You'll have to remind me, but I know you've talked before about how poverty, causes trauma. And one of the things that really stood out to me, as I mentioned earlier, was the class nuance that is missing from Vivek and Elon Musk. You know, Vivek, I get it. You know, you did really well and you went to Harvard. Congratulations. But Vivek has to understand, or maybe he does and he's just playing dumb. He has to understand that when you already start off with two parents that have a college degree, you are already a step ahead of those of us, like my parents did not have a college degree. So you're already ahead, even though, you know, you said your parents came here with nothing. They came here with a degree. So you were already there.
Right.
I don't think that people like Vivek and Elon understand what it is like to actually be poor, what it is like to not have generational wealth, what it is like to struggle in this country. And then someone who has all that tells you to your face, you need to do better.
They don't. And it's that phrase which I like, you know, there's far too many folks in this country born on second base, walking around thinking they hit a double. Like, here's the deal. And you know, it's not your fault if you're born into privilege, but it is your responsibility to accept that you were and be honest about it and use that to help dismantle privilege, because privilege is toxic, right? And so, yeah, in my TED talk, I talk about how it's not just the act of being poor or the status of being poor, it's being poor in a richer society. And there is tons of research on how being on the bottom rungs of the ladder, and it could be because of racism or income or wealth inequality or the combination. In this country, we like to combine those, right? That what that does to us. I mean, the studies are done on other primates. That when you look at like other primates that have not, they don't all, but very hierarchical structures, those on the bottom, and it's actually not just primates. They've done it with rats and other. Those on the bottom rung get sicker easier and die younger, and so do humans. You know, it's interesting. In my awakening as a white person walking around in this world, not realizing for a whole long time that I didn't, you know, that I had all this privilege. You know, I'm like, okay, I want to be. I need to know more, and I read and I talk to people and I listen, right? But I've come to that part where I get the whole, you can't have a conversation about racism unless you're willing to talk about privilege and white supremacy, because that's where it stems from. Well, it's the same thing with poverty. We need to talk about poverty and the damage of inequality, but we also have to talk about the psychopathology, the pathology of privilege. These people are out of their fucking minds. Sorry, I don't want to hurt your algorithm. Frigging minds, right? And so, because you're being already, you know how they are on that tube to political dissent. It is pathological. The way billionaires think is pathological. They've done studies on intense wealth and income privilege. The richer you are, the less likely you are to slow down if someone's about to cross the street. Seriously, right? Like, so they know there is this. We don't know, unless we've ever been in that club or you've done the research, how they think. They don't see us as one of them. They being the ruling class, you know, when it comes to wealth and power, they do not see us as equals. So it's not just that they're greedy and they want to exploit us. They don't see us as equals. And when you look at like the genocide in Gaza, the extreme version of that is the dehumanization of the folks that are being genocided and slaughtered, right? But there are different degrees of it. The wealthy and the powerful in this country don't see us as equals to them. And there is something about wealth and power where they feel, and I'm trying to say this in a non-crazy way, there's something about having healthcare when others doesn't that makes some people feel good. It's not just like, oh no, we can't afford to give it to everyone. It's like there are folks who like having things others don't have. There's something about the fact that there are unhoused people that make wealthy and powerful people feel better about their position. When you're that invested in status, you need and require, Marx talked about this, the idea of a permanent underclass. And they get off on it. There is something truly pathological about Vivek Ramaswamy. Elon Musk is, I mean, he's not well, right? Donald Trump, these folks, but it's not just them. They're the most garish kind of like examples. Joe Biden's worth a whole bunch of money, and obviously Nancy Pelosi, all those folks, and even the celebrities, they're in this. It's right. It's very, when it comes down to money and power, they do not see us as equals, and therefore they don't care what happens, and they will lie to us and do whatever they can to keep their position in society. One last thing I just want to throw out. There was a study done some time ago, and it was an easy study to do. They just looked at the folks that won Academy Awards as opposed to those that came in like second, or they were nominees but didn't win. If you win an Oscar, you live on average 4 years longer than those who were runners up.
Wow.
There's something about winning. And I will tell you, these people, why is Elon Musk doing all this weird stuff, putting chips into it? They think they can live forever. They really do. They're not thinking with a group mentality. And the last piece is humans only survived because of a group cooperative and collaborative mentality. We would never have survived as a species if, when we did the hunting and the gathering, a couple of people got almost everything and then the rest were like on their own, tough luck. That's not programmed into us. These people are not consistent with our social evolution. And one day it would be nice if the idea of a billionaire or even a multimillionaire was an aberration, and we look back and think, oh my God, how could we have let that happen in society? It's so sad.
Denise, I want to go to you about this one. It's something I did notice on Twitter. Vivek Ramaswamy, after he did get this pushback from a lot of his supporters, he decided to tweet out that we need to end affirmative action, almost as if like a quick jab there towards Black Americans. Oh, let me just try to get back on the good graces of white supporters that I had. Let me try to get back in their good graces. What's your take about that? What do you think he was doing there?
Yeah, this reminds me of when I started to pay attention to Vivek back in February, I think it was, of 2023. Vivek's grift is really obvious to me. And it is to cater to the cowardice and the lesser angels of white America by showing, I can be one of you too. The way to get in with the powers that be of America, and anyone who's saying that's not white people is tripping, okay, is to punch down on Black people. And everybody who comes to this country who has any sense of self-preservation and comeuppance understands that equation pretty quickly. And it takes a person with character and morals to choose to be the opposite of that. Vivek is very shrewd. He knows exactly what he is doing. And earlier in the conversation, someone was talking about him not knowing what it's like to not have parents. While he may not have experienced it, it doesn't take that much compassion, emotional intelligence, intellectual capacity to understand that when you have been divested from in the nation, and when you don't have that foundation, you are more likely to struggle. I hear the professor talking about adverse childhood experiences, toxic stress, and the like, and the impact that has on your longevity. Vivek understands that. Vivek is about the business, though, of getting what Vivek wants. And he well understands, as do so many people, that if you cater to white America's bigotry toward Black Americans, you are a shoe-in.
Well said there, Denise. And we'll wrap it up here with Zeneb. Zeneb, final thoughts on all of this. It's just, these are crazy times. I got to tell you, it's a new year, but some things have already happened that I never thought would happen. Go ahead.
It kind of reminds, I'm going to use a weird analogy here, but it kind of reminds me of like, these people are pushing the blind side. You know, these rags to riches stories. One white lady plucks you out and exploits you. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you become a football star. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You were seen, you're that one person, that exception to the rule. Or we just watched It's a Wonderful Life. And my daughter was like, oh, wow, I did not expect this from that time period where the community came together. Can you imagine at the end of It's a Wonderful Life if everyone was like, I got my house on my damn own. I ain't doing nothing. I'm not going to take any money up there. You know what I mean? Instead of coming together as a community, there would be no film. It would be pointless. I remember a few years ago, it was probably like 6 years ago, I was listening to NPR and this story came on and it reminded me of what Anthony was talking about. And this guy had followed these upper middle class. We're talking about millionaire families or like, you know, making $700,000-$800,000 white people. It's all white people in the suburbs, middle, you know, upper middle class America, gated communities and stuff. That he followed these families and their kids. One thing he noticed and one story that stuck out to me, but he said it was universal across every single family but one. And that family happened to be Black that it wasn't universal with. But he said across the board, when he talked to this family, one example that he gave is when the kids got married in this wealthy family, they had a yard sale out of the house to help raise money for not even really to help raise money. They just wanted to have a yard sale, get rid of some things. And that would be some extra cash that these kids could use, you know, that these young adults could use on the new home that their parents had just bought for them. But when he went back and interviewed them 20 years later, you know how they said that they got their house? They didn't say our parents bought it for us and put almost all the down payment down where we only owed very little per month after that. No, they said we had a yard sale to raise money for our house. And that's what he saw across the board. And I think that reminds me of meritocracy. That comes back to when I talk to poor people who people help them, they'll say, I was so grateful. You know, I had this person who gave me a job when I couldn't get hired anywhere, and they'll come in and they'll work for that person and they'll work 12-hour shifts and they'll keep showing up, you know, or they'll say, you know, my grandma died and she left me $5,000 and I was able to buy a car, you know, or they'll say, you know, I had a babysitter to help me watch my kid. My mom helped me watch my daughter so that I could work. Poor people admit when they get help. Mm-hmm. Wealthy people like Donald Trump says that he pulled himself up by the bootstraps with his $3.5 million loan from his mom and dad in 1978, right? I think that's a difference. And I think that poor people need to realize that you can't hold on to becoming a billionaire. You're not going to become Elon Musk. Yep. So that fantasy needs to be thrown out the window, and then circling it back to H-1B visas and migrants. And we named a whole lot of things way beyond H-1B visas that are causing problems with us being able to get jobs here on this panel. We named that temp work is a huge problem, right? All these companies are wanting to hire us all temporarily and not in any kind of positions with no benefits. We named not being able to go to school because tuition's outrageous and you can't go to school to be a doctor if you're someone poor. That's a pipe dream. We named healthcare as a problem. We named childcare as a problem. Taking care of your kids, even as a mom. You know, how are you going to get... My kid has 146 IQ, which I don't even really necessarily believe in the test, but she wants to do the academic thing. So I have a struggle trying to work full time and be able to do that for my child, so that she can have an opportunity that I didn't have, right? It's very difficult. And all of these are barriers that classes like Vivek and Elon and Trump and Biden and Kamala Harris and, Hillary Clinton, people on all across the political spectrum who are the leaders don't experience, because we don't have anybody really in Congress or anywhere, hardly anyone, that has walked in our shoes.
And
And
I
that,
think
you know, I think we can't really blame the immigrants, although we can acknowledge the problem with what comes with work and what comes with jobs and what comes with focusing on people that are here and what comes with investing. If we want to talk about investing, we can talk about defunding these wars, right? When we just gave, what was it, 127 billion this year in warring alone that was spent. So yeah. Sorry for the ramble, but I thought that this was an awesome panel, and every single person here had something amazing to contribute, and I was just popping around in my head to everything everyone had said.
all right. Thank you guys so much. Anyone have anything coming up that they want to shout out? Anybody?
I'll just let people know you can pre-order my movie now on Apple TV. It is called Left at Wall. So just Left at Wall on Apple TV. It drops January 24th. So if you're not an Apple TV subscriber, don't worry. It's going to be available everywhere on January 24th. And you can just follow me at Romplacone on social media for all that. But Left at Wall comes out January 24th, and you can pre-order it now on Apple TV.
The one thing I would say, go ahead.
Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, I'm sure I'll be having spaces talking about immigration and all of the policies that Trump's going to be implementing. You can check out the mini spaces that I've already recorded on Twitter in my highlight section. And the other thing I will say, inspired by Zainab there, is for those of us who are rising to power, and I hope there are many people, Sabby, in your audience who are using this platform of civic education that you provide to think about what it looks like to be in that seat of power. Don't develop the curse of knowledge, which is what Zainab was talking about, where you forget what it was like to not have what you have now. Remember where you came from and pull everybody up that you can who is willing to come with you.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that, Denise. Yvette, anything coming up for ADOS?
Well, I just want everybody to go to adosfoundation.org. We do have an immigration agenda that does speak to H-1Bs that was there long before this controversy. So please check that out. We also have chapters across the country. You can look and see which chapter you can join. If you want to join a chapter, you can go to joinados.com and also join. We also welcome allies. You don't have to be ADOS necessarily. You have to be on board with what we're doing, because I believe that this is movement work. So we have to get busy.
Awesome. Yvette, I'll have to bring you back on another time to talk about some of these actions that have happened in the states that did not work out.
We will.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. All right, guys. And then there was just me. I'm sorry. It's just me now. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we do have 3 news stories that I do want to get into tonight. We will do call in after the show tonight. I figured, it's been a minute. I was away for the holidays, so I figure we do need to chizat, and we'll get into all of that. Let's go ahead and go through the super chats, and then we'll get into the next story. I'm going to try to stay on schedule, fam. Trisha says, I should have voted third party. You know what, Trisha? It's all right. It's all right, Trisha. We see that you understand. We see you understand. Shout out to Donna Lee, who just became a Sabby member. Give Donna Lee a big whoop whoop. Thank you, Sparky. Free Greenland from Danish tyranny. Thank you, Melanie. He acts like it's impossible for someone to be prom queen and math Olympiad champ or valedictorian and jock. Oh, that's a good point, Melanie. Thank you, Author, for the super sticker. Thank you, La Senora says the problem is the immigrant, don't whitewash them. Thank you. Thank you for this one. Nice to see another piñata other than Mexicans. I don't know what you mean, La Senora. Thank you, Gamble. Agreed. Historical context is always key. Constitutionally, democracy replaced feudalism and absolutism, but plutocrats are who assume governance, becoming the succubus of America's soul for profit. Thank you, Roger. Time to start forming our own worker co-ops with government subsidies. Thank you, Chris. Just some info. There is also H-1B visas for seasonal temp workers. Capitalists have made our job market global and not domestic, so the world becomes their playground to exploit. It's sick. Wow, I didn't know about the H-1B. Thank you, Gamble. A wage anymore is a political optic. Were it cost effective and available to get away with elitists, would reinstitute chattel slavery. Believe it. Oh, I do believe that. Thank you, Cooper. While fighting over M-Lord table scraps, there's a danger of falling into the trap of believing that worker solidarity ends at the border. And thank you, Eric. Substantive reparations must be achieved through a liberatory framework so that reparations is not reduced to some means-tested nonsense. Interesting. Shout out to Marlene Neen, I think the G is silent, for becoming a member. And shout out to Joanne, who says, Sabby, thanks for sharing your superpower, assembling and facilitating powerful discussions among informed and well-spoken guests. Thank you. And thank you for the super sticker, Derek Fuller. Let's get the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Hey. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Dave Burt. Thank you. And thank you for becoming a member, Trell Y. Jers. Shout out to Trell. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not done so, smash the like button. What is wrong with you, fam? Smash the like. Thank you very much. And we're going to get into this next news story here. So everybody has heard this by now. New Year's Eve, the attack in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. I'm going to tell you what I think is really going on and the connection or possible connection between that particular incident and the incident in Las Vegas with the Tesla explosion. Let's go ahead and start with that first announcement. You know where you were at this time, or maybe you may remember, maybe you don't, maybe you were asleep, but I remember where I was when this was announced.
You're watching BBC News, and the breaking news this hour is from the United States, where city authorities in New Orleans say that 10 people have been killed and 30 others have been injured after a vehicle hit a crowd in New Orleans. It happened in the early hours of New Year's Day on Bourbon Street in the French quarter of the city. Now, this is the scene at the moment where you can see multiple emergency services vehicles with their blue lights flashing. We know that after the incident, multiple police and ambulances were dispatched to the scene. Social media footage, which appears to have been filmed today, also suggests that numerous shots were fired by the
and we can stop it there. You guys get the gist of that. You probably know the rest of that story, yada, yada. Now, many people are asking, like, why did this happen in New Orleans? And if I were to make a guess, think about the big events that are coming up in New Orleans this weekend. There was the Sugar Bowl that was supposed to happen. I think that may be delayed. And the Super Bowl is right around the corner, technically, which is also taking place in New Orleans. And then not too long after that, before you know it, you have Mardi Gras at some point. But anyway, Bourbon Street is a busy area. And of course, on New Year's Eve, it is going to be packed. Like, people like to go out and party on Bourbon Street. They have since announced the suspect who is dead. And this is the part, like, I got some questions about, because something don't feel right to me. This just all feels a little bit fishy. A little bit fishy. It almost seems a little too convenient the way this was packaged together. Whether it's the ISIS flag, whether it's the military experience and the timing that this is happening, and this possible connection to the explosion in Las Vegas. Let's go in here when they start to discuss the suspect.
And we are starting to learn more about the now 15 who were killed as a result of this attack, including 37-year-old Reggie Hunter from Baton Rouge. He had just texted his family Happy New Year a little earlier in the evening, according to his cousin, who tells us that he was someone who liked to laugh and tell jokes. He loved his family, loved his kids, leaves behind an 11-year-old and a 1-year-old just hours into 2025, Wolf.
Our deepest condolences to his family. Art Omar, thank you very much. I want to get right to our chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst, John Miller. He's getting some new reporting for us. John, what are you learning?
Well, Wolf, what we've been trying to do is develop a richer picture of who is the man behind this carnage in New Orleans. What do we know about him, and what can that tell us about motive? And what we've learned from multiple sources is that Mr. Jabbar apparently made, according to authorities, a series of voice recordings on video.
Pause. This particular image that you see right here was from his YouTube channel. So at one point he did have a YouTube channel. It is gone, where he was talking about businesses and all that type of jazz. So that's gone. His LinkedIn page has already been removed, but I got screenshots. So we're good. We're good. We're going to get there. But the man who was speaking is intelligence. So just keep that in mind. Okay. It's always important to understand who is on these networks. So that's who you're getting the message from. Now, first and foremost, I do want to say my condolences to everyone who lost their life in New Orleans. It's sad that people can't just go out and have a good time and they have to worry about these things happening to them. That being said, there are a number of things here that just don't sit well with me. He said that there are audio recordings, a series of audio recordings that he has made. I have not heard them. Have you heard them? I have not heard those audio recordings. I don't know. And it just, to me, when I heard more about the story, it almost kind of feels like to me that someone put him up to this. And if you want to know who that someone is, or you want to question who I think that could be, ask yourself, who benefits from this situation? Think about that for a second, and we'll continue on.
As he drove, they believe, from Texas to Louisiana to partake in these attacks, allegedly. The recordings talk about the turmoil in his family, the long-fought, bitter divorce he was going through. He discusses, according to officials briefed on the videos, where it appears they're made while he's driving.
Oh, 1 second.
Mass casualties in the name of ISIS. So what we're starting to see is an individual who was experiencing turmoil and stressors in life, who was going to act out in some kind of violent way, and at least according to what they believe are his own words, decided to do this as an alternative to killing his family.
Pause. So he was stressed out with life and he decided to turn to ISIS. This just feels weird to me, man. I feel like this guy was put up to this. I don't feel like this is a decision that he made on his own. I feel like he was told to do it, maybe ordered to do it. I don't know, but I don't feel like this is a decision that he just woke up one day and said, that's it. I'm upset. I'm going through a divorce. I'm pissed off. That's it. I'm turning to ISIS. Seems a little weird to me.
In the recordings, he also has a last will and testament where he divides up what little money he has left after all the financial losses and setbacks he had suffered to family members. So they're beginning to get a picture of what was going on, and it seems to be what was going on in the background of this individual's life that was as much of a driver as any commitment to terrorism.
Yeah, John Miller, great reporting as usual. Stand by. I'm going to get back to you in a moment or so.
So that is the comment there from intelligence about the suspect, right? So I want to show you a couple of other things because I'm just piecing these things together. I'm thinking about the timeline, etc. And let's talk about a couple of things. So first and foremost, this happens, boom, right at the new year. Right at the new year. Also, new president administration coming in. Put these two things together. Also, it wouldn't be like the FBI and the CIA have not put people up to this sort of thing before. This smells very fishy to me. I believe it has intelligence all over it, whether it's CIA, whether it's FBI. If it feels very weird to me, the timing of it all, and also his name and the type of name that he has. Just put the pieces together, ladies and gentlemen. He was in the military. That part to me is not surprising. He was in the military. He apparently also had worked with Deloitte at some point. We'll pull that up in a second. I don't believe that this guy just woke up one day and said, everything's frustrating, so the answer to me is going to be ISIS. I just don't buy that. That just seems a little weird. But I want to show you how the FBI and the CIA have done this before. Now, this is James Lee. He's going to show you examples where they've done this before.
The New York Times is reporting that the suspect who plowed through crowds in New Orleans today, killing at least 15 people, was carrying an ISIS flag and that the international terrorist group may have played a role in the attack. Reuters is reporting that this man, the suspect, Shamsuddin Jabbar, quote, may have had help. Well, what kind of help could we be talking about? Could it have been an elaborately orchestrated FBI sting, where the FBI provided all the necessary tools, the weapons, the bomb, maybe some money? Could it have been an entrapment operation gone wrong? The FBI would never prey on vulnerable people by luring them into fake terror plots. No way could undercover FBI agents help an autistic teen plan a trip to join ISIS. The US government would never spend $500 million creating fake Al-Qaeda propaganda videos. Would the FBI have created an actual terrorist? I'm obviously kind of half joking a little bit, but the fact that I can semi-legitimately ask these questions with receipts tells you everything that's wrong with the current state of the FBI and the US government.
Exactly. So think about that for a second, and then ask yourself, well, why would they want to do that? What has happened recently, ladies and gentlemen? What has happened recently when we talk about geopolitics? It's been over a year since Israel has been bombing Gaza. Israel has lost the narrative. Their reputation has been destroyed across the world. There's no coming back from that. A lot of people see Israel for what it really is, and they've seen the racism coming from Israel towards the Palestinian people. Video footage. They've seen kids like blown apart. They've seen all of these things, and they've seen the racist rhetoric and actions that have come from the state of Israel. So there's no coming back from that unless your last ditch effort is to try to find a way to make Americans fear Muslims again. And this is what I was thinking about. His name, now I don't know for sure if he was practicing the Muslim faith. I do know he was born in the United States and raised in the United States. I see people online saying, oh, he immigrated here. No, he was born and raised in the United States. He did not immigrate here. So there's that. But it's just very strange to me. So again, look at his name, Shamsuddin Jabbar, right? How do you get people to stop looking at what you're doing and to put their fear towards another group of people? Think about that. I also think that this will be another excuse for them to ramp up the police state, for them to escalate more war in the Middle East. Because the one thing that stood out to me is they said, oh, he had an ISIS flag. Really? He just happened to have that? He just happened to have that and had it on the back of the truck. Doesn't this sound weird to you guys? It sounds a little too neatly packaged for me. So there's that. But the US government and Israel, they lost the narrative for the need for more war. They have lost that narrative. So this to me feels like it has Mossad all over it. If I were to make a guess. Now, obviously, the news isn't going to come out and say that. Why would they? People are asking, how is it he was able to drive through the crowd? Well, apparently, those ballards, they have these metal ballards that are usually above ground that prevents that from happening. The ballards just happened to be down that day. How did he know it was going to be down? How did he know that? Think about these things, guys. Let's put two and two together. During one of the busiest nights on Bourbon Street, New Year's Eve, how did he know that the metal ballards would not be there that day? Who knows that? Who has that type of information? Now sit on that and marinate. Then we go to this situation in Las Vegas. A Tesla truck just explodes outside of Trump Tower. Now they are saying that this gentleman here, Matthew Allen Livelsberger, is the suspect. But in the statement from the Las Vegas police force, this just came out before I went live, they are not 100% certain that the body they found in the truck is this guy. But him, Matthew, and Shamood have a couple of things in common. Listen to this, folks.
He's of Colorado Springs, Colorado, born July 22nd of 1987. Now, as you'll see here on a picture of his driver's license, let's see, the question really still remains for me, and I know that there's a lot of you folks in the media that are identifying this person as the person in our vehicle. As I mentioned to you already, his body is burnt beyond recognition, and I do still not have confirmation 100% that that is the individual that was inside of our vehicle. And so,
excuse me? So the Las Vegas police, he just told you he does not have confidence of 100% that this is the same person. Interesting.
As I'm calling it now, the subject or person of interest, I will not come back until I have the confirmation through DNA or medical records that this is indeed, in fact, the subject inside of the vehicle. Now, further complicating this identification of this individual, we also discovered through the coroner's office that the individual had sustained a gunshot wound to the head.
To the head.
Prior to the detonation of the vehicle.
Okay. So now they have added this piece of information that there was a gunshot wound to his head prior to the explosion. Guys, these two events took place within 24 hours. There was literally the attack in New Orleans and then this explosion in Las Vegas within 24 hours. From two guys who just happened to at one point work at Fort Bragg. Now, Fort Bragg is a large military base. I know. I lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Fort Bragg is one of the largest military bases in the world. But still, it just, come on, man. Someone mentioned in the chat, they said, well, Sabby, they were saying that the medals were down for maintenance before the Super Bowl. Right, but he doesn't even live there. He doesn't even live in New Orleans. He doesn't live in Louisiana. He lives in Texas. So how long was he there? How long was he in New Orleans? How long was he in Louisiana? How long has this been planned? Who put him up to? Start asking yourself these questions, because I'm not here to tell you he didn't do it. What I'm getting you to ask is who put him up to it? And the same thing for this guy. People are saying that this was a message that he was trying to send to Donald Trump, but he voted for Donald Trump. He rented the Tesla, set off the explosion in the Tesla, allegedly, because again, they said they don't even know if this is the same person, outside of Trump Tower. Some are saying it could have been a message that he was trying to send to Donald Trump about working with Elon. I don't know, but I find it very strange that both of these events happened within 24 hours. Let's continue.
One of the handguns was found at his feet inside of the vehicle. Obviously, in how we're trying to identify him, and I'm feeling comfortable to give you this information, is a tremendous amount of substantial evidence to include he rented the Turo vehicle. There are two tattoos, one of which was on the stomach and one of which is on the arm, that we can see bits and pieces of it as in comparison to what it is that we now know he had on his body. That has given us a lot of confidence that this is, in fact, the same person, as well as which the clearly obvious, which is the credit cards, the military identification, the passport. And then furthermore, as you'll see here in just a very short period of time, we tracked his movements from Colorado to Las Vegas, And in a number of the photographs that we were able to determine, he was the individual that was driving the vehicle. And also, I'd like to iterate this point to you. We still have only ever seen him in this vehicle, and we're not aware of any other subjects involved in this particular case.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this guy, so they're saying he drove from Colorado to Las Vegas. And then you have Shamood, who I'm assuming traveled from Texas. He could have been coming from another place at the time, but he's from Texas to New Orleans. Now, let me show you something else. When you look at his work history, because again, like I said, they deleted his LinkedIn, but this guy got a screenshot of it. Shamsud Jabbar. Listen to this. His current job was Information Technology Team Chief at the U.S. Army Reserve. Previous jobs include IT Team Leader at U.S. Army Reserve, Information Management Officer at U.S. Army, Senior Information System Specialist at U.S. Army, Human Resources Supervisor at U.S. Army, again, HR Specialist, U.S. Army, Data Clerk, etc. So Army. However, that's the LinkedIn profile. But when you take a look further and you look at his profile, this is on Rocket Launch, I believe. It mentions something that the LinkedIn profile apparently did not. And that's this part here. 2022, he worked at Deloitte. So Deloitte is one of those, big like consulting firms. They recruit at like schools like BU. I've seen them come there and recruit before. But he also worked at Deloitte for business development. He was a cloud data architect at Deloitte, a data engineer there as well. So this piece that is on Rocket Launch, whatever it's called, was not on the LinkedIn that we saw. He also worked for EY. He worked for EY for cloud transformation as a cloud transformation advisor, cloud architect and team lead, cloud governance analyst. So this is someone, again, into information technology, cloud systems, data, etc. Now, let's look at Dude. When we go to Matt, the alleged Cybertruck bomber suspect served at the same military base as terrorists responsible for the attack in New Orleans. Authorities are now actively investigating a possible connection between the two men. When we look at Matt's LinkedIn, which apparently was still up at the time, Operations Director, Intelligence Manager, Remote Autonomous Systems, SUAS, Special Forces Green Beret. So you have someone who was an intelligence manager in the military, and then you have another one that worked with information technology in the military. What happens if you put the two together? Right. And both of them spent time at Fort Bragg. So the question that I have again, did these men decide to just wake up one day and do this on their own, or did someone get them to do it? We have to continue thinking outside the box. When I first heard this story, I was like, this is insane. Something is a little bit off here. And then there's something else. Senator John Kennedy, he said something. They talk about something in this interview that I want to draw your attention to. They're already starting it, fam. Watch this.
Just a final question here for not just people in Louisiana that are watching, but people coast to coast that are watching tonight. Are you getting the sense that there's any threat of any other potential attacks tonight on any other major cities?
I can't answer that. I can, but I won't.
Is New Orleans safe tonight?
Yes, but we're still in the process of tightening up security. We're still in the process of doing everything that we possibly can. The governor's called out the National Guard. We've got more FBI coming. We've got Homeland Security people. We've got state troopers who've done an awesome job. We've got the NOPD. We're doing everything we can. But like I say, there's a lot of information out there. Some of it's accurate.
Okay. Just a final question here for not just people in Louisiana that are watching, but people coast to coast that are watching tonight. Are you getting the sense that there's any threat of any other potential attacks tonight on any other major cities?
And there it is right there, folks, the hysteria. You see, now the media's job is to make you afraid that this is going to happen in other places as well. Does this sound familiar? If any of you were around, if you were born or maybe old enough to remember after 9/11, does this sound familiar to you? Because let me tell you what I think is going to happen, folks. What I think is going to happen is I think that they are going to use these two events in particular as a reason to crack down on anything supporting countries in the Middle East that are not Israel. You think I'm joking? Watch them find a way to put this blame back on Iran in some way, shape, or form. Watch them try to use the excuse. See, we told you that they were radicalizing these American people. We need more censorship. We need more surveillance. Pay attention, folks. We need more surveillance to watch you so you can behave better. We need more censorship because the American people are being radicalized by Islam. Pay attention to it and follow these notes. Next thing you know, they're going to tell you you can't march in the streets anymore with the Palestinian flag. They're going to tell you you can't have a protest to support Gaza. They're going to say that is also a terroristic threat. Mark my words. It's predictable at this point. It is absolutely predictable. We can go to this from Whitney Webb because she's sounding the alarm. She's trying to let you know. Some of the same prominent people who rightly have been pointing out that the FBI and the CIA are deeply corrupt, which they obviously are now saying that we should just believe those agencies about the motives and identities of those behind the recent attacks, and also believe the FBI and CIA people that the U.S. is now infiltrated and invested with al-Qaeda operatives poised to bring chaos to the U.S. in 2025. Put it together, folks. Even more odd, some of those people used to rant for hours about how al-Qaeda and ISIS were creations of the U.S. government, either directly or indirectly. Funny how narrative management works. Al-Qaeda is definitely a U.S. creation, and fear over current and or future attacks will be used to market a complete techno-tyranny takeover. You'll be told that the digital ID, digital surveillance, money, and Palantir big data pre-crime algos are the only ways to stop terror attacks, and it will be disturbing to see how many people fall for the ruse. I am warning you guys now. I'm warning you now. Don't fall for this. Don't give in to the fear and don't consent. Digital ID and many of these technologies will only stick if you voluntarily comply and adopt them. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be their excuse to ramp up surveillance. This will be their excuse to, we got to go stomp out the terror in the Middle East because it made its way to the U.S. This will be their excuse to try to go to war with Iran. And we have a new presidential administration coming in. Put the pieces together, folks. So if I had to make a guess, this to me has Mossad all over it. To me, I don't believe these two guys acted alone. I don't believe it. You can believe what you want to believe. But I just want to remind you of this. I want to take you back to when the ex-head of the Mossad admits that Israel helped ISIS. Just to jog your memory.
There have been reports that Israel has been treating wounded Syrian rebel fighters in its hospitals on the border, including fighters from Nusra Front, which is, of course, the al-Qaeda proxy in Syria. Do those reports worry you that Israel's helping wounded al-Qaeda-aligned fighters?
As I said before, in a different context, it's always useful also to deal with your enemies in a humane way. And I think that when you have people who are wounded and you can deal with them in a humane way, the considerations as to whether to take them in are not simply whether it's politically useful or whether it's politically
So it's purely humanitarian, you say. So there's no tactical or political strategic...
I didn't say there's no tactical. I said the main consideration, the immediate consideration is humane.
But the tactical issues involved, I mean, you know better than me the phrase blowback. You don't think there's going to be blowback against Israel if you get into bed with a group like Nusra Front?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there's going to be blowback.
Why?
Because I think that, unfortunately, the rules of the game in Syria are such that you can do anything that is not possible to be done anywhere else.
Yeah, I think people said that in Afghanistan too. Would you also treat Hezbollah fighters?
No. I would not treat...
Have you not just contradicted what you told me 60
I've not
seconds ago
contradicted,
about humanely treating your enemies?
No. I think as far as Hezbollah fighters are concerned, with them we have a different account.
So let me be clear, you're happy to treat Al-Qaeda fighters, but not Hezbollah fighters?
We have a different account with Hezbollah, a totally different account, because Hezbollah has carried out the type of actions against us which preclude us from going into what the Al-Qaeda has done. Al-Qaeda, to the best of my recollection, has up to now not attacked Israel.
But it's attacked your number one ally and protector and sponsor, the United States of America. There is a quote-unquote war on terror being going on for 15 years.
So there it is, folks. Don't you think it's a little bit strange that you never hear about ISIS attacking Israel? ISIS is one of those groups that it disappears and it returns. It appears every now and then out of the blue just to remind you, hey, we might be still around and still a thing. You hear about all of these attacks that is supposedly, they say it's ISIS in all these different countries. Don't you find it strange that ISIS never attacks Israel? These are the pieces that we have to start to put together. And what I saw come from this is that this is going to be used, and you can already see people doing it on social media. You can already see people like Bill Ackman on social media saying, yeah, we got to fight back against the terrorists and fight back against these people. This is going to be the Zionist canary in the coal mine, because what they're trying to do is to change the thinking of the reputation of Israel. They're trying to find a way to win that back. I still don't think that's going to work. I think it's too far gone. But as long as they have you paying attention to what has just happened New Year's Eve, to this event on Bourbon Street and the event in Las Vegas, you're not paying attention to the fact that Israel just blew up another ambulance, which they did. You're not paying attention to the fact that there are numerous supplies that are right outside of Gaza that are not allowed to be brought in, that people are starving, that there's disease that has been brought there because of the lack of sanitation, because of the dirty water, because of everything that has happened all around them. So ask yourself again, who benefits from what just happened? You don't. Think about it. That's what I want you to walk away with. Eric, we can go to part 2 when you're ready. It all just seemed a little fuzzy and a little fishy to me. It really does. I don't know. Something is just off about this. Shout out to Zainab for becoming a Sabby member. Give Zainab a big whoop whoop. Thank you, Sophia. Austin PD is going to remove the barriers on 6th Street. Knowing what happened in NOLA, they are planning another attack and have to be stopped before it's too late. Why would Austin do that? Interesting. Zainab says there have already been bills that have been pushed for more digital surveillance. There you go. Shout out to New York Varsity for the super sticker. And shout out to New York for this. So when white people do it, it is a mental illness or about gun control. But this one is going to be addressed differently. We know this. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Ladies and gentlemen, 2025 is live. 2025 is live. Let's get the comment on, I think that's Rumble. Yeah. And we will do call in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I figured you want to do that. Thank you for the tip on Rumble, RB Ham. You're close, Sabby. Mossad, CIA, MI6, and every Western intel agency all work together for the same goal: full spectrum control. Crazy stuff, fam. Crazy stuff. All right, guys, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. like a Care Bear. Now, I told you last year that 2025 was going to be live. I didn't realize it would happen this crazy. Like, it's just January 2nd and things have already popped off. But walk with me here, because there is something that I found very humbling coming into the new year. And that's this article here from Chris Hedges. Now, you all know that former President Jimmy Carter passed away. So Jimmy Carter died, and Jimmy Carter was 100 years old. I don't know as much about him as some of the other presidents, but that was okay, because Chris Hedges told me everything I needed to know about Jimmy Carter. And what I really like about this article is that Chris Hedges is not just focusing on the good that Jimmy Carter did. He actually takes a balanced approach, and he also focuses on the bad things that Jimmy Carter did. And we need to talk about that. There's a lot of people after Jimmy Carter passed away, they were giving him a lot of praise. And it's as if they forgot about some of these things that Jimmy Carter did during his presidency. You see, a lot of the good from Jimmy Carter that people speak of are things that he said or did after his presidency. So Chris Hedges decided to let people know. He said, wait a minute, hold up. Don't deify Jimmy Carter. He also has an audio version of this as well. Jimmy Carter may have done good works out of office, but in power, he fomented a series of domestic and foreign policy disasters. So peep this, fam. Thank you, Chris, for this one. Jimmy Carter is out of office, had the courage to call out the abominable oppression and persecution and strict segregation of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza in his 2006 book, Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. Let's take a look at that. Here's Jimmy Carter talking about Israel being an apartheid state in this interview here with Piers Morgan. This is how you know Piers Morgan is full of it too. When Piers Morgan pretends like he's just hearing about what Israel is, you have to know that that is an act. This interview is from years ago. Take a look.
I think more than any other episode or incident or situation on earth, this is the most directly affecting adversely America in not bringing peace to Israel and justice and peace to the Palestinians. Yes.
You obviously were very successful in bringing peace with Israel and Egypt. Can any deal be done that doesn't involve sitting across a table with Hamas?
I've met several times with Hamas leadership, and I think they are willing to accept Israel to exist peacefully within the 67 borders or some modification of those borders. But the first step has to be to bring Hamas and Fatah together so they can have another honest election. That is a major premise, and I think the 67 borders between the two with some modifications will lead to a two-state solution. Netanyahu now, I believe, has decided unequivocally to move to a one-state solution, which every one of his predecessors in the prime ministership have condemned as a disaster for Israel. And I think Israel is now moving toward a disaster for itself and insisting that all the way from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea has to be Israeli controlled. That is a mistake. The word apartheid is exactly accurate. You know, this is an apartheid is.
We'll come back to that one right there. Okay, so that was Jimmy Carter talking to Piers Morgan. So again, like I told you, Piers Morgan, this is all an act. He knew what Israel was doing. He's spoken to people about this before, and that was many years ago. Let's go ahead and bring this back in here, because it goes on to say some of the good that Jimmy Carter did when he was out of office. This is what people got to remember. He dedicated himself to monitoring elections, including his controversial defense of the 2006 election of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and championed human rights around the globe. He lambasted the American political process as an oligarchy in which unlimited political bribery created a complete subversion of our political system as a payoff to major contributors. So yes, those things are good. Like, I'm not going to deny, like, that's good. Great. But we have to also mention the bad. And that's what Chris Hedges does. But Carter's years as an ex-president should not mask his dog service to the empire, penchant for fomenting disastrous proxy wars, betrayal of the Palestinians. See, people leave this piece out. They talk about what he said about the Palestinians after office, but when he was in office, he betrayed them. So we can't forget that. The embrace of punishing neoliberal policies and his subservience to big business when he was in office. So again, Chris Hedges is calling out the good and the bad. Carter played a significant role in dismantling New Deal legislation with the deregulation of major industries, including airlines, banking, trucking, telecommunications, natural gas, and railways. He appointed Paul Volcker to the Federal Reserve, who, in an effort to combat inflation, drove up interest rates and pushed the U.S. into the deepest recession since the Great Depression. Hence why Carter probably lost. Here we go. A move that saw the start of punishing austerity cuts. Carter is the godfather of the pillage known as neoliberalism. A pillage fellow Democrat Bill Clinton would turbocharge. This part is important. What Chris Hedges is pointing out here is that a lot of times we point to Bill Clinton and we say it was Bill Clinton who changed the Democratic Party. But what Chris Hedges is pointing to is that that change actually started with Jimmy Carter. I didn't know this. So again, like, he was one of the presidents I didn't know as much about. And I wasn't alive when he was president either. And he's just not one of those presidents that we even studied in school. I remember, like, they didn't really talk much about Jimmy Carter. Just that Jimmy Carter didn't win re-election. That was kind of it, right? So pay attention to these things. Carter fell under the disastrous influence of his Svengali-like national security advisor, Brzezinski, a Polish exile who rejected the Nixon-Kissinger reliance on détente with the Soviet Union. Brzezinski's life mission, one that meant he saw the world in black and white, was to confront and destroy the Soviet Union, along with any government or movement he deemed to be under communist influence or sympathetic to it. If I am correct, I believe Brzezinski is Mia's father. So you guys know Joe and Mia on Morning Joe. I believe that's her father. He goes on to say here, Carter, under Brzezinski's influence, walked away from the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks Treaty, SALT II, with the Soviet Union, which sought to curb nuclear weapons deployment. He increased military spending. He sent military aid to Indonesia. He sent military aid to Indonesian New Order government during the Indonesian invasion and occupation of East Timor, which many have characterized as a genocide. Well. I didn't hear people talk about this when Jimmy Carter passed away. This is why you gotta, this is why I read Chris Hedges' articles. Yeah, Mr. Lola said, yes, Mika is, that's what I thought. That's Mika's father. Mm-hmm. It goes on to say here, he supported, along with the apartheid state of South Africa, the murderous counter-revolutionary group, the National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, led by Jonas Savimbi. He provided aid to the brutal Zairian dictator Mobutu. He supported the Khmer Rouge. So did you guys know that Jimmy Carter, it says along with the apartheid state of South Africa. So that's bad. And I didn't know this. Again, you learn something new every day. First Amendment said Chomsky told this about Carter, crimes of U.S. presidents. Like, this is bad. So he was agreeing alongside there with apartheid South Africa. Wild stuff, man. He instructed the CIA to back opposition groups and political parties to bring down the Sandinista government in Nicaragua once it took power in 1979, leading under the Reagan administration to the formation of the Contras and a bloody and senseless U.S.-backed insurgency. This was a domino effect, because what Chris Hedges is saying is that this domino effect, at least with the Democratic Party, it seems like it actually started with Jimmy Carter, not with Bill Clinton. So some of the actions of Jimmy Carter during his presidency led to some of the actions of Ronald Reagan during his presidency. It's almost as if Jimmy Carter painted. No. It's almost like Jimmy Carter paved the way for Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton. Now, you have to remember something else about Jimmy Carter. Remember, he had a primary challenge. That was Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy did win states during the primary challenge. Now, of course, he didn't win the primary. And Jimmy Carter went on to run for president again. And he lost. That's when Ronald Reagan won. And what people have alluded to since this day is that because Jimmy Carter faced a strong primary challenge, which is Ted Kennedy, that actually led to his loss in the general election, because it showed that there were some states that wanted to support Ted Kennedy. I mean, these are things I'm just, you learn along the way. But Jimmy Carter was no saint. I mean, this is what Chris Hedges is pointing out. He provided military aid to the dictatorship in El Salvador, ignoring an appeal from Archbishop Oscar Romero, later assassinated, to cease U.S. arms shipments. Why isn't anybody talking about? He poisoned U.S. relations with Iran by backing the repressive regime of Shah Mohammad Reza until the last minute, and then allowing the deposed Shah to seek medical treatment in New York, triggering the occupation of the U.S. embassy in Tehran and a 444-day hostage crisis. Does everybody remember this? Some of you are old enough to remember this, the Iran hostage crisis. So this is wild, right? Carter's belligerence, he froze Iranian assets, stopped importing oil from Iran, and expelled 183 Iranian diplomats from the U.S. This played into Ayatollah's demonization of the U.S. and calls for Islamic rule. He obliterated the credibility of Iran's secular opposition. Fam! This cannot be ignored. It really can't when you look at some of the connections here. Yes, Yantra. Yantra said Jimmy did that. Yes. So these are the things that people are not discussing about Jimmy Carter. So it's important that you do know this. And Chris Hedges went deep. Carter gave Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, although he ruled under martial law, billions in military aid. Jesus Christ. He armed the Mujahideen in Afghanistan after the Soviet intervention in 1979, a decision that cost the U.S. $3 billion, saw the deaths of 1.5 million Afghans, and led to the creation of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. So as much as people are talking about Al-Qaeda, Jimmy Carter's connected to that too. When you have a moment, please read the full article, this article here from Chris Hedges. Eric can put it in the chat. And this part right here, he backed the South Korean military in 1980 when it laid siege to the city of Gwaju, where protesters had formed a militia, which led to the massacre of some 2,000 people. And here's the part where he screwed over the Palestinian people. He sold out the Palestinians when he negotiated a separate peace deal known as the Camp David Accords. In 1979, between Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, sorry for the names, you guys. The agreement excluded the Palestine Liberation Organization from the talks. Israel never, as promised to Carter, attempted to resolve the Palestine question with Jordan and Egypt's involvement. It never permitted Palestinian self-government in the West Bank and Gaza within 5 years. It did not end Israeli settlements, a refusal that led Carter to later claim Begin had lied to him. But since there was no mechanism in the agreement for enforcement, and since Carter was unwilling to defy the Israeli lobby to impose sanctions on Israel, the Palestinians found themselves once again powerless and abandoned. But some people, they only want to focus on the things that he said about Gaza and Palestine after his presidency, like this interview here with Amy Goodman from Democracy Now!
Is exactly accurate. You know, this is an area that's occupied by two powers. They're now completely separated. The Palestinians can't even ride on the same roads that the Israelis have created or built in Palestinian territory. The Israelis never see a Palestinian except they're Israeli soldiers. The Palestinians never see an Israeli except at a distance, except the Israeli soldiers. So within Palestinian territory, they're absolutely and totally separated, much worse than they were in South Africa, by the way. And the other thing is, the other definition of apartheid is one side dominates the other. And the Israelis completely dominate the life of the Palestinian people.
Why don't Americans know what you have seen?
Americans don't want to know. And many Israelis don't want to know what is going on inside Palestine. It's a terrible human rights persecution that is far transcends what any outsider would imagine.
And we'll stop it there because we can't show everything. But what I was saying is that that's the part about Jimmy Carter that a lot of people will retweet or they will, give him applause for. But they're not talking about how he sold the Palestinians out when he was in office, when he was president. They're not talking about all the things I just read to you from Chris Hedges' article. They're only calling out the good things that Jimmy Carter did after he was president. And they're not talking about how he actually increased some of these military conflicts, how he escalated tensions when it came to geopolitics. They're not talking about some of those things. And so there is a such thing as nuance. And what I liked about that article is that Chris Hedges said, don't deify Jimmy Carter. I mean, you ain't got to throw him under a rock, but at the same time, there are people out here pretending like Jimmy Carter was a saint and did everything right. And a lot of you probably didn't even know about the information I just read to you from that article. So there's good things and there's bad things. So don't deify Jimmy Carter. All right. Let's go to some of the comments here. And we got one more story and then we'll head on over to call in, ladies and fam. Thank you here. Thank you, Mark. Sab, Carter was the victim of the October surprise. Carter was close to a deal for the hostages, but George Bush met the Iranian rebels and told them to keep the hostages until Reagan won the election. Okay. He was president at the time. I was just like he was the president. Gamble said proof positive that some old people get to a point before transition where they say, bump it. I'm telling all and leaving it on the ledger. Yes, that does happen. V said, Sabby, you need to look up names and words before No, I know. I should have looked up the names. I'm sorry, V. I know. Zainab says, glad you're covering this. Carter destabilized the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan at the bidding of Israel. Later, he shed light on it, but he also helped create it. Yeah. And that's all I say, folks. If you're going to talk about Jimmy Carter's legacy, just make sure you talk about the good and the bad. All right. We got one more story, ladies and gentlemen, and then we're going to head to call in. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. All right. One more story for you folks, and this is a doozy. Dr. Umar, a friend of the show, sent me this video of Dr. Umar, and then it caused me to look up another one. You know, Dr. Umar has always said that he supports reparations. He supports it for the entire diaspora. So he's not in favor of lineage-based reparations, so to speak. Okay. But then this video, according to this, he doesn't even think that Black people, this generation, should have reparations. I kid you not. Again, friend of the show sent this to me. You can get ready to laugh if you want. Wood said, Dr. Umar goes full Sambo on the topic of reparations. LOL. Let's play through this once and then we'll chime in.
You are asking for cash. Then your reparations list ain't worth much.
That's what I said.
Because your reparations list should put you in a position to make all the money you want on your own. What you need to pay out from info. But Black people are so worried about money that we can't see the bigger picture. We also fail to recognize that reparations is not just for us living. It's for those gone and those not yet here.
Come on.
I ain't heard nobody talk about how much we're going to put to the side for the generations unborn yet.
Facts.
And that's why I believe that this generation of Blacks in America, we shouldn't get the reparations. We are too irresponsible.
Ain't ready.
We will waste it.
Yeah.
Put the reparations in a trust somewhere until we get a more revolutionary, more conscious group of Blacks. Let them decide what to do with it. We ain't there.
Yeah.
Look at all the bunny hopping and we do. What we doing with reparations?
Easter Sunday.
No. So we can blow the money. I had a sister text me one day. You know what she said? Can you stop talking against reparations? Because I need that money to pay my bills.
Oh, man. Short-minded. Short-minded.
Reparations is to repair, not to pay your damn weed bill.
Fix my debt.
Oh, man.
Okay, let's chime in.
You are asking for cash. Then your reparations list ain't worth much.
That's what I said.
Because your reparations list should put you in a position to make all the money you want on your own. What you need to pay out from info. But Black people are so worried about money that we can't see the bigger picture. We also fail to recognize that reparations is not just for us living. It's for those gone and those not yet here.
Come on.
So let's talk about the cash part. I thought we've addressed this before. I don't know, but it's a debt that is owed. So if we go back to General Sherman's promise to freedmen at that point in time, the promise was 40 acres and a mule. Apparently this started to happen for some, but was quickly cut short. So of course did not happen for the majority of freedmen. The 40 acres is land, the mules, your transportation at that point in time, but land is net worth. That's a part of net worth. So net worth is what you own minus what you owe. So just think about all that generational wealth that would have been created if that would have happened the way it was supposed to. So think about that for a second. So he has a problem with the cash part, but it's a debt that is owed. I don't understand why. This is the part that just drives me crazy. If I owe you $500, it's a debt that I owe to you. Now you have the idea or you have the right to handle that however you want. If I owe you $500 and I promise to pay that $500 to you, you have the right to take me to small claims court if you want to. You can do these things. The problem for freedmen, though, is that we have a debt that is owed to us. And the most recent case that I saw was shut down. And that was in Oklahoma when the survivors of the Tulsa massacre, and yes, there are some who are still alive, they took the case to court to get reparations for their homes in their town burned down. And the judge rejected it, threw it out, said no. So what are we supposed to do? is a debt that is owed. Let him go on.
I ain't heard nobody talk about how much we're going to put to the side for the generations unborn yet.
Facts. Facts.
And that's
Pause. Go back one more time. I'm sorry. I don't like this line.
I ain't heard nobody talk about how much we're going to put to the side for the generations unborn yet.
How much are we going to put aside for the generations that are not born yet? So if I give you money, it is not my place to tell you how to spend it. Everyone say this with me. If I give you money, it is not my place to tell you how to spend it. That is your decision. So if Friedman got reparations, it's really not his place or anybody else's place to say, okay, here's this money for reparations that are owed. Now you need to take 5% of it and put it aside in an account somewhere for the next generation. No. It's the same thing when people come to me and they say, well, I think that Friedman should have reparations, but I don't want to tell them how to spend it. So I think that money should go to Black community leaders. And I push back and go, no. I don't know those leaders. We don't know a lot of those people. They say give it to community leaders. Like who? Like Al Sharpton? We don't know a lot of those people. That's the other thing. And I'm supposed to trust that they're going to do the right thing? Not on me to tell you how to spend it. He goes on to say this.
Facts. And that's why I believe that this generation of Blacks in America, we shouldn't get the reparations. We are too irresponsible.
Get ready.
We shouldn't get it because we are too irresponsible. This generation should not get it because we're too irresponsible. So there he is using a blanket stereotype to frame an entire group of people.
We're wasted.
Yeah.
Put the reparations in a trust somewhere until we get a more revolutionary, more conscious group of Blacks.
Let's go back to the trust.
In a trust somewhere until we get a more revolutionary, more conscious group of Blacks.
Pause. No other group was told to put the reparations in a trust somewhere until they become more conscious. When Japanese Americans receive, and they got cash reparations, when Japanese Americans received cash reparations, the question was not, are they conscious enough and ready for this yet? Maybe we should tell them to put it in a trust until they're ready for it. Or maybe we should put it somewhere to the side for them until we feel they're consciously ready for it. That to me is a stalling tactic. When I hear this type of rhetoric, when I hear people say, oh, you're not ready for it, put it in a trust somewhere, you're not conscious enough for it yet. To me, that's just a way of stalling progress. And I told you before about people that will do this, people that come into certain organizing or activist spaces that will try to stall the progress as much as possible. Because I'm sorry, that is owed to freedmen in this country. You can't sit back here all these years and just say, I know it's been a long time and I know you were promised 40 acres and a mule, but let's just put that money in a trust somewhere until you're more conscious and ready for it. This is when I hear Dr. Umar talk about this to me says that he is there to delay the progress. That's an infiltration tactic, by the way, in organizing spaces. I don't know if you guys know about that. That is an infiltration tactic. That doesn't mean he's necessarily an infiltrator, but that is a tactic where people go into organizing spaces and they try to delay the progress as much as possible.
Let them decide what to do with it. We ain't there.
Yeah.
Look at all the bunny hopping we do. What we doing with reparations?
Easter Sunday.
No. So we can blow the money. I had a sister text me one day. You know what she said? Can you stop talking against reparations? Because I need that money to pay my bills.
Oh, man. Short-minded.
Reparations is to repair, not to pay your damn weed bill.
Fix my.
So you see this, right? Okay. And you can agree or disagree with him on some of this. But once again, it's not my place to tell you how to spend it. Here's another one here that was sent to me. Listen to this part.
That's where we're messing, even with the reparations movement. We're going to sabotage that.
Do you think that's a legitimate movement?
I was about to ask, do you think that happens? Like,
is that real? Or is that political talking points to get black people riled up and at the voter booth?
There is an organization, National Coalitions for Blacks for Reparations
I've
in
heard
America,
of them, yes.
who I respect. They've been around for a long time. I think they have been drowned out in this conversation, although they have been the most consistent and have put in the most work for reparations. I think they've been drowned out by this recent wave of utopian social media opportunists who are trying to hijack the narrative in the conversation for personal, selfish, financial reasons.
He said utopian. Oh my God. Who said it here? Where did it go? Oh, I just had it. Someone said something about this. Yes. Music World said that is very rich coming from a person always asking for donations for his school he has yet to build. Yeah, you're right.
I'm bringing it up to say reparations is a legitimate movement. It is as old as slavery. The first reparationists were Pan-Africanists. It was born of the Pan-African movement. We've always had a fight for reparations since slavery. Now, this new age social media reparations conversation, I think, takes away from the seriousness and the integrity of the original reparations movement, because I think it's too much focus on I want some money right now.
Mm-hmm. Who is he talking about here? Is he's talking about the social media movement of reparations? I mean, okay, so Yvette, for example, was just on here for the panel, right? ADOS is an organization. Like, I mean, look at it this way. Like, even if you don't agree with Yvette on everything, you can't say like, look, they didn't start an organization, and the organization has chapters like in different cities. I mean, at least they did. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you can't sit here. There was an ADOS conference. There was an ADOS conference last year. I mean, it's not like they're not doing anything. So if that's what he's referring to, I mean, when it comes to the social media thing, I'm like, yeah, they're on social media, but they're also building things. So I guess I don't understand why he sees it that way.
I don't think the people carrying the conversation
hold on. I don't know
of the original reparations movement, because I think it's too much focus on I want some money right now. Mm-hmm. I don't think the people carrying the conversation.
I hate when this thing does this. Where are we? 320. This is a YouTube thing. Sorry, guys.
Of the original reparations movement, because I think it's too much focus on I want some money right now. Mm-hmm. I don't think the people carrying the conversation.
Let me just do it this way, guys. Sorry. Sometimes the YouTube, it gets stuck right there. Now, where was I? Right about here. He doesn't think the people carrying the conversation.
Think the people carrying the conversation right now are concerned about the long-term health of Black America. Yeah. When I go on social media, I keep saying people say, I need some money. So they're not thinking about slavery. They're not thinking about reparations. They damn sure not thinking about Black community reconstruction. They just want some money like a PPP loan. Yeah, they see reparations as a PPP loan. And you know what they're going to do with it? They're going to take that money right to white people.
Yeah, put it on FanDuel.
Same day.
Same day. Yeah.
So this seems like a stalling tactic to me. And I think that Lance brought up a good point. He said Yvette is a serious person building a legitimate reparations movement. Umar is out here chastising people for interracial dating. Yeah, someone put in the chat, they said, oh, invite him on. Seth said, just interview Dr. Johnson. Oh, he definitely ain't gonna come on here. Seth, I got love for you, but he's definitely not gonna come on here. But yeah, to me, I think that, again, I think Yvette has they've done a really great job. And I know it's not just her like by herself, but it is an organization. They've had conferences, like they do have different chapters and things like that. And when I hear Dr. Umar use this type of framing, it feels like a stalling tactic. And as someone who's been in organizing spaces for different issues, I don't know, man. I feel like I can spot them now. I feel like I can spot the people that's like, you're trying to delay progress. You're trying to stop it from working. That's why you're here. I feel like I can
get them
feel
a car and a and some new weave.
Yeah, they gonna have Lambo trucks parked in front of grandma's house.
And this is why the new Jack social media reparations flunkies, they take issue with me when I say that if I were in charge, reparations does not get distributed to this generation of blacks. Because when I look at 21st century Black America.
Oh, what happened?
We're the first fifth. The first fifth of the 21st century is over. It's ours. Can somebody tell me what have we achieved in the first fifth of the 21st century?
Nothing. We still got a collective $0 wealth base.
Changed anything? Have we fought for anything?
No.
Have we built anything? Have we changed anything? So let me give you, we the laziest group of black folks that ever existed. I'm just going to keep it a buck. We are the laziest, most self-hating group of black people that ever existed. And you're the ones who want reparations? So we're supposed to trust you to use this money for the reconstruction of Black America when all you care about is yourself? We don't get the reparations, bruh. We can continue to articulate it, formulate it, put it on paper, but the distribution got to come later when there's a more responsible, more racially loyal and conscious group of black folks. If we got that money today, y'all know we would destroy it tomorrow.
Man.
There it goes with you got to be more conscious. You got to be more, I guess I better take my lazy ass on then. No, come on, guys. Come on. You know what this is like? Oh, you're not ready for it right now. We need health care for everybody in this country. No, you're not ready for it right now. You see what I'm doing? You see how this works? You're not ready for it right now. You're not conscious enough. If we just got it, we would just blow it. Again, it is not up to you to tell people how to spend it. I don't give a damn. If that were to happen, if Freedmen did get reparations, and let's say my friend decides that they're just going to go buy like a car, a fancy car and a house and all, that's none of my damn business. It's their money, and it's not my job to tell them how to spend it. That's just how I see this. That's not a fair excuse. You know what? Apply that to every other group that received it then. Apply that to the Japanese Americans that got it for their internment camps. Apply that same logic then. So I don't like the whole we're not ready. I don't like this we're lazy comments. I know people out here working 2 and 3 jobs, Dr. Umar. I know people working multiple jobs just to pay the rent. Stop saying that, well, this generation of black people are, which generation are you talking about, by the way? Who are you talking about? You talking about us millennials? You talking about Gen Z? Who are you talking about? Then got my blood pressure all up. People like Dr. Umar, I feel like they're there to stall and to delay progress. That's what I think. And I've been in organizing spaces and I've seen it before. Instead of bashing it, why isn't he trying to work alongside some of the people who are organizing and that have had conferences about this and are making inroads in communities? Why isn't he doing that? Why isn't he doing that? Why is he going to all these different podcasts and just speaking terribly about it? If he was serious about that, why is he not trying to organize or mobilize or any way with those people? And listen, I'm not an expert, but I'm learning. And at least I'm willing to have that conversation. I had the conversation with Dr. Darity. I highly encourage everyone to read Dr. Darity's book. In case you're still curious or you may feel you don't know how you feel about reparations, read Dr. Sandy Darity's book. Start there. And then you can move forward. But I feel like if you really were serious, you really wanted to make that happen, then you would be trying to work with people, not work against people. I call it like I see it, fam. All right, guys, we are going to do call in Eric's going to come on and go through. I think we got a couple of comments. Eric, I'll be back. I'll create the Zoom room and I'll be back.
All right, here we go. All right, so this is the part of the show where Sabby takes a little break. Let me do a little resizing here. There we go. And during the break, Sabby's going to set up the Zoom room for what we used to call call-in, which is where anyone in the audience can come in and let us know what they think. We like hearing from you all. But yeah, it used to be an app called Call-In. Now it's a Zoom Hangout, and that'll be starting shortly. We'll give you the link as soon as it's available and a way to get in there. And in the meanwhile, I'm coming from the background to the foreground to read off some of these chats and see what else is up. Thanks for this super chat. Jay Tolbert, he says, it seems like Carter had his own proxy war when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in '79. Yep, there was, no shortage of stuff going on then, as now. Isn't it Chomsky who said that every modern president, if the basically qualifies to be prosecuted as a war criminal, which I think is pretty true. All right, let's see. Thanks for this one, Rolando. He says, excuse me, he says, Adnan Khashoggi, the uncle of slain journalist Jamal Khashoggi, is connected to that Jimmy Carter story. The rabbit hole is deep. And he's also saying, hi, friend, Boaz Kim Music. All right, thanks for that super chat. And thanks for this one, Jasmine Harrell, who says, we too irresponsible, like we're kids. We need a trust. Somebody take the mic from that fool. And thanks, Critical Mass. Said, can we drop a beat tonight, please? We need some dancing. And hashtag free Luigi. And thanks for the super chat, Nexus Games. Sabby, it was the courts that reversed the decisions. In addition to taking them back, they implemented additional procedures with banks, regulators, and others to ensure Black people enslaved, and this never ended. And we also had this chat from Music World Wonders, who talking about Umar, saying that is very rich coming from a person who's always asking for donations for his school he has yet to build. And thanks Sharon, who for the super chat, who says his grandparents are Cuban. And thanks for this one, Nicole Smith says, I wish Umar would hush because he's not a freedman. And thanks for this one, Michael R. Sabs, Umar also has to consider all of the generational wealth stolen from us. The National Highway Bill destroyed billions in Black wealth alone. I mean, I guess that was one thing I was struck by in that conversation, was that like he was talking like reparations would be just like enough to pay a few bills or something. I mean, if you're talking about reparations, you're talking about a lot of money that, spans in a debt owed over generations. So it's not like it's just some pocket change. Thanks for the super chat, Gamble. What other demo is operating by that foolish philosophy that's like telling us to wait for a sweetened by? Ain't nobody else moving like that. And thanks for the super chat, Roger Meadows, who said, Umar comes on your show all the time. You call him JB. And thanks for this one, super chat, Regine Jolly, who said, really sad. He sounds like a plant on reparations. This is 400 years of free labor. Who is he representing? Not the FBA. The debt is long overdue. He's using stereotype. Happy, and she says, Happy New Year, Sabby. Thanks for that super chat from Regine Jolly. Yeah, so like I said, this is the in-between part where we give Sabby a little break before we jump over into the call-in room. Let me see what I was going to bring up here on the old, what we used to call Twitter, but now, of course, got renamed to X. But there was a thing that let me bring up my thing here that that came up. Here we go. I just got to remind myself here. Yeah, I mean that was one thing about this in terms of how we're reacting and what's going to happen with the story, with what happened in New Orleans with that attack and this Tesla one, and I feel like the thing to just really hone in on is that the corporate establishment, the deep state, they're going to use this regardless of how it happened or why or what was behind it. They're going to use it to as a reason and as an excuse to increase surveillance, increase censorship, and to me that's the true danger. And the other part of this is that, like, there's the idea of what we do about it, and what I always try to do with any of these stories is to take it to then what if you want to see what to do about it. I think you need to frame it in terms of demands, right? And what are our demands? And so when it comes to something like what Sabby was saying, what was saying they're going to do with this in terms of increasing surveillance and censorship, we need to be on the other side of it with a clear demand about how things should be operating. And that takes us to number 7, which is under the banner of reject censorship, because that's really what they always end up doing with this stuff is they come after things, doing things like the TikTok ban and surveillance and censorship. And so I would submit that what we need to do out here on the real left is have a program of clear demands that includes things like under reject censorship, is the idea of always protect freedom of speech, whether that censorship is coming from the government or from corporations, because of course they'll backdoor it through corporations. We got the prosecution of whistleblowers and journalists, and of course you had Assange, and Assange is freed, but now, which is good, but the message was delivered. This is what happens to whistleblowers and real journalists. And then getting into real practical things of dealing with the censorship industrial complex, as it's aptly called sometimes. There's the idea we need to break up and nationalize these large media corporations. And while we're doing that, then we can reorganize them as employee-owned and governed co-op model organizations. I mean, can you imagine if like CNN changed into an employee-owned co-op that was run democratically? Yep. It would be very different. And then there are other things on this kind of a list, which is, common carrier style rules, which gets into how they operate and things like equal time rules and things like that. There's deplatforming and that whole thing on social media. The government will use these big companies for backdoor censorship. Then there's the whole thing with the algorithms that are huge. There's a lot of targets here. It's like a target-rich environment of how things can be fixed and improved. And so what I'm trying to get at generally is that we need to be clear on these are our demands. Like, lay out what the problems are, and then say, okay, this is what we need to do to fix it. And our movement that we want to be trying to put together here is backed by these clear demands. All right.
That's right. All right. We are going to go into the call in. The link to that is pinned at the very top of the chat there. So I'm going to go ahead and open the room while I'm on stream. Always do that to make sure you guys can get in. So let's go ahead and do that. And then we are going to make sure that everyone, when you enter, mute your mic at first, because we like to make sure people mute their mics. And if you want to speak, the way this works is you raise your hand. So to raise your hand on Zoom, if you go to the bottom of the screen, on my phone, there's an option that says raise hand. You just raise your hand. For some of you, it may be under reactions, but you raise your hand if you want to speak. That's how I know who to call on. And then let's see if it needs that passcode. Some people may need the passcode. If you catch this stream after the fact, go to sabbysabs2.com and you'll get the link and the passcode there as well.
Or you can use it now.
Or you can use it now. It seems like people are getting in without the passcode.
No, I mean, you can go in through the link in the chat here now, or you can go in with, if you go to sabbysabs2.com, that gets your link to get right in.
Oh yeah, let's do it that way. It's a lot easier that way.
That's what we like. Nice and easy.
Yeah, sabbysabs2.com. You'll get that link as well, because when we end a live stream, the live chat isn't available right away. So you go to sabbysabs2.com, you'll get that link and you'll get the passcode. But it seems like people are able to get in without the passcode. I see a number of people have already joined. So there's that. And then we can, let me mute myself on here. Okay. And then again, if you want to
make me co-host in there.
Yeah. And Eric, I'll go ahead and make you a co-host.
All right. And I'll see you all in the Zoom Hangout.
Yeah, should be a pretty interesting time. So we can talk about the stories today. Like if you want to talk about the panel, if you want to talk about any of the news stories I covered, feel free to do that. We usually have a good old time over there, over at the call-in. So I try not to keep you guys too long. So let me go ahead and jump over into that. And other than that, guys, have a good night. Keep up the fight.